Welcome into another edition of Hand Raised Guys, presented by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. I'm Neil McCready. Today on the show, a guest-packed edition of the show. I think this is one you guys are really going to enjoy. Just pull up a chair. You're going to be here a while. A pretty long version of Hand Raised Guys. We'll make this the Friday Oxford Exxon podcast. Might even put this out in multiple podcast form if you're making your way up to Oxford, down to Oxford, over to Oxford, whatever the case may be, for Ole Miss and Alabama Saturday afternoon, 2:30 at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. Got Mike Griffith of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, back by popular demand. An absolutely spectacular appearance by Mike. You're going to love this. Lots of thoughts about Lane Kiffin, about Mike Leach, about Georgia, about Ole Miss. He gives you Rebel fans out there a lot of hope about what might happen this weekend in a couple of locales, including Oxford and obviously including Fayetteville, Arkansas, where Arkansas entertains LSU. Ole Miss, of course, needs a win over Alabama and a LSU loss to either Arkansas or Texas A&M down the road for Ole Miss to get in, I guess, possession of its own destiny again in the race to get to Atlanta to face the team that Mike covers, the Georgia Bulldogs. We talk about them quite a bit as well. Also talk to Ryan Brown of The Next Round, based out of Birmingham, visits with us all the time. Get his thoughts on Alabama's, mental approach at this point. After 2 losses in a season, Alabama, for all intents and purposes, eliminated from the SEC championship race, from the national championship race. How will Nick Saban's team respond in Oxford? Get Ryan's thoughts on that, the Auburn job, and more. Parker Fleming with the Purple Theory podcast. He covers TCU. We talk about the Horned Frogs a little bit, but I'm more interested in talking with Parker about his statistical things that he does on Twitter. You can follow him at StatsOWar. It's pretty fascinating stuff. I look at it every week as I get ready to make my picks and just to kind of get an idea of what to expect. Real deep dive statistical analysis. We talked to him about how he comes up with that, how accurate they are, how it develops over the course of the year. And then we do our weekly visit, of course, with Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports. Get you ready for the weekend ahead in college football, also the weekend ahead in the National Football League. So all of that coming to you. First, let me tell you about Comer and Southern. It's going to get cold this weekend. You want to make sure that heating system's ready to roll. You want to make sure it's safe to operate. So get in touch with the people at Comer if you live in the Oxford, Tupelo area. They'll come out, check it out, make sure you're ready to go. 662-801-1777. 662-801-1777. If you live in Hernando, Memphis, that area, get in touch with the people at Southern. 662-429-4429. As I said, we'll make this the Friday Oxford Exxon podcast. We're coming up on our 10-year anniversary with Oxford Exxon. Oxford Exxon Highway 6 West in Oxford. Stop in on your way in for the game. Stop in on your way out after leaving Oxford, if you would. You can fill up at the pump. Always clean, always reliable. And you can go inside as well. Get snacks, drinks, whatever the case may be. Always clean. Plate lunches, always great. They're always going to take care of you at the Oxford Exxon. We appreciate a decade of partnership with all of the people there. I'm coming to you from the Clark Ford Studios. Speaking of almost a decade of partnership, we've been with Clark Ford for a long time too. 662-257-1900 is the number. Call it. Ask for my friend Corey Clark. Tell Corey what Ford product you're looking for. He'll send you a quote within 15 minutes in business hours. Right to the bottom line. No hassle, no haggle. You get your quote. The rest completely up to you. You can shop that quote around, or you can do what I've done, what I recommend that you do, and that's hop into a Clark Ford today. 662-257-1900. Guests are going to join on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. Rafters on the Square is the perfect place for your Christmas party or gathering. They can accommodate parties of 10 to 500. It's great food with a Cajun flair and holiday drinks in a festive atmosphere. Call Jeannie 601-842-0948 to request a catering menu and reserve a date at Rafters on the Square. There's a lot of stuff up on our network earlier today. Mind on My Money, presented by Pinnacle. Martin Palomo and I talked about election results from earlier in the week, what that might mean for the economy as we head into the holiday shopping season. Also, McCready and Siskey, powered by Rain Total Body Fuel. We made our latest picks on the road to Boise. I take a 8.5 game lead or so into the weekend. So personally for me, I'm hoping add a little more cushion to that lead. Also have Pete's Pigskin Preview getting you ready for number 10 Alabama at number 11 Ole Miss. That's brought to you by Walk On Sports Bistro, where they put everything they've got into bringing you game day with the taste of Louisiana. Dig into the mouth-watering, made-from-scratch Louisiana cuisine, po' boys, gumbo, voodoo shrimp, plus fan favorites like juicy burgers, fresh salads, all of that in front of 70-plus TVs, 40-plus ice-cold beers on tap. Also, let Walk-Ons take care of all your tailgating needs this season. Inquire today about their family and friends bundles, their tailgate platters. Order online at walkons.com or on their convenient Walk-Ons app. Visit them in Oxford or Ridgeland today. And we got the Butcher versus the Spin Instructor, presented by LB's Meat Market, 2008, University Avenue in Oxford. It's right across the street from Kroger. You don't need Kroger, though. Just use it as a landmark. Head over to LB's, the freshest cuts of chicken, beef, pork, house-made sausages, stuffed jalapenos, stuffed mushrooms, the bacon-wrapped asparagus. So many more treats there at LB's Meat Market, 2008, University Avenue in Oxford. We'll have the MPW Digital post-game show on Saturday night. That's brought to you by Dead Soxy. Go to deadsoxy.com, promo code Rebel Grove. Get 25% off the best socks you will ever put on your feet. So for now, let's get into our guest. Mike Griffith will lead off with the AJC. This is more than an hour with Mike. A lot of SEC talk. You guys are going to absolutely love this. Mike Griffith of the AJC joins me on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. My longtime friend and colleague, Mike Griffith, AJC, kind enough to give us some of his time today. Mike, first of all, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate your time as always.
You bet. Good seeing you.
Good seeing you. I'm going to start here because the last time we had you on, it was a very popular segment. You weren't down on Georgia, but you weren't crazy about some of the things that you were seeing. Since then, they've played a lot better football. Just last weekend, of course, they just dominated Tennessee in Athens in a performance that certainly on the defensive end I didn't see coming. I didn't know anybody could do that against that Tennessee offense. You've been covering the Dogs the last few years. I know these last couple of weeks you've been just hard at it. Did you see that coming at all?
A little bit. And the reason why, Neil, and you know this, one or two guys can make a difference in your football team. And we heard at the end of last year, and we saw firsthand, when you think about the national championship game, I'm going back a little bit here and people might wonder where I'm going, but you think about the national championship game. And when those two Bama receivers went out and they put a backup guy in who's no longer with the program, by the way, he dropped the ball inside the 5-yard line, right? That was your first sign that something might be wrong in Alabama once those two receivers were gone. The very next play, Georgia's number 88, Jalen Carter, blocked a field goal attempt. And then the very next play after that, James Cook went 68 yards. The Jalen Carter field goal block, he said, man, that Jalen Carter, yeah, they got Jordan Davis, and he's the Outland Trophy winner, and they got Devontae Wyatt, and both of these guys are first-rounders, but everybody's telling us that number 88 is a better defensive lineman than either one of these guys, that he's more disruptive. And he said, wow, wait until next year when Jalen Carter gets turned loose. Well, Jalen Carter hurt his ankle on the very first play of the season, Neil, and he soldiered through it in the win over Oregon. And he played kind of injured the next few games. He only played 8 snaps in the second half of the first day. He wasn't himself. He was limited. And then he sprained his knee and he was out 2 games. And you thought, well, maybe that's it for Jalen Carter. But no, he came back against Florida. He impacted that game, only 20 plays, and got better and healthier. And Neil, he played 48 snaps. Defensive tackles don't play 48 snaps, but this could be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Right now, NFL teams are looking at this guy and wondering if they might take him over Will Anderson. He played 48 snaps. He caused both fumbles, 2 turnovers, 1 guy. He made a sack. He had 2 tackles for loss, and he moved the pocket all day. Now, there might have been other guys that finished hooker. They had 6 sacks, but that line jumped 6 times. Part of it was noise because they were scared to death that they were going to get beat off the snap by 88. That guy was a one-man wrecking machine. So that was part of the magic of what. Now, part of it, too, was Kirby knows how to sub quickly. They practice. They've got elite athletes. They're playing one-on-one. But when your quarterback can't set his feet, and you say, oh, if he just would have made the throw. Well, if he could have set his feet, he would have. That's why it was 3 feet off. That's why the timing wasn't quite there. You couldn't envision it because nobody had pushed the pocket and affected the quarterback since that game against Pitt. And that's the kryptonite. Move the quarterback, get him off platform. Georgia was able to do that. You have to have the talent on the back end. The crowd noise certainly helped. And then the second half, there was rain. But we can talk about that. That slowed Georgia down too. Kirby only threw the ball 4 times. But to your point, so 1, Jalen Carter. Okay. 2, they've been missing a deep threat. Now, Arian Smith didn't go in there and catch 8 passes for 200 yards, but he caught a 52-yard bomb early. And as you and I know, and the people that are knowledgeable, that are listening, that one deep ball, that stays in the safety's mind the rest of the game. It stays in the coordinator's mind the rest of the game. Holy cow. They got number 11, maybe the fastest guy in college football. He's only played about 30 snaps in his career over 3 years, but when he's out there, he's elite. And he caught a ball early.
You have to account for him when he's out there, right? So it affects everything that you do, everything
changes everything. And that's a player you didn't have earlier. Right. And then the human intangible, Stetson Bennett. Listen, Neil, I don't know what version you're going to get. For 3 quarters, he stunk it up in the championship game. And then he has a miraculous drive of 4 or 5 passes and the switch is flipped and they score. And then against Florida, he completes half of his passes and throws 2 picks in the last game. And you're saying, oh boy, he better play better than that against 10. And he does. He plays great like he did in the Orange Bowl. I mean, I don't know which Stetson we're getting. Apparently his phone number got leaked and Friday, and the Tennessee fans are like, don't do that. Our fans are so dumb. Like, you really want to piss this guy off? Like, no, this is let's sleep. No. So you've got Stetson dialed in where he's not going to take an hour and a half to clean his truck and be late for an interview, right? I.e., Sports Illustrated Pat Forty story. The guy shows up an hour and a half late for a national publication story, and the guy says, oh, where were you late? I had to clean my truck. I got a date tonight. Really? Yeah, that's Stetson Bennett, folks. And it's an American legend. The truth is better than the Disney version everybody wants to sell you. Doesn't care about class. He's not a student athlete. He's got 31 ACT, Neil. He doesn't want to go to class. Oh, wait a minute. That doesn't fit in the script. Oh, but it does. These are the Netflix days. One day we'll see the whole story and you'll learn that this is not you want your children to grow up to be like Stetson. No, you really don't. You want the results, and you're not supposed to get the results if you go about it like Stetson Bennett did. You're not supposed to leave after a year and go to a Mississippi junior college and come back only because they can't find anybody else to back up Jake Fromm, and then stick around and have him not sign 1 transfer quarterback over you, Jamie Newman, but 2 in JT Daniels. And then the coach isn't supposed to bench a 7-0 guy who's put up the highest passer rating in school history that was a Heisman Trophy frontrunner for you when you're not going to class and you're not practicing well. But that's exactly what's happened. And here we are with Georgia number 1, Stetson Bennett coming off the best game of the season, back in the Heisman race. And I just it's just like you and I've covered this. Like, this doesn't fit the script. We always say, well, the names and the names and the faces change, but we've seen this act before. Neil, I've never seen this act before. I can't explain it.
And you've covered a lot of stuff at a lot of places. I mean, you've Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan State. I mean, you've covered
Auburn,
lots of stuff. But
nothing like this. So, like Lane Kiffin. There's never been people. Oh, he's the new Spurrier. No, he's not Spurrier. No, he's not. Oh, he's like no, he's not. No, Lane is Lane. Lane is a man of the Twitter era. Lane and Twitter were made for one. He has found his niche. And let me just say it before we go here. He belongs at Ole Miss. Lane doesn't work at Auburn, folks. And you covered that program, Neil, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't put words in your mouth, but I'll stop right there. I don't think Lane works at Auburn.
I was going to ask you more about Georgia in a second, so I'll go back to this, but you brought up Lane, and that's what our people want to hear. Lane Kiffin at Auburn is such a horrific fit that it just, you keep waiting, and I think frankly, I don't think it's going to happen. So if it does, it does. And if it does, I'll be like, you were wrong. I'll say, yep, I was wrong, or whatever. People get stuff wrong. I'm obviously get things wrong. If you told me a year ago Lane Kiffin goes to LSU, I buy it totally, completely get it. If you told me he goes to Florida, sure, got it.
That's the one. That's where Florida messed up. I agree.
Yeah. If you told me in 2 years that hey, he goes to Texas, goes to Alabama, got it. Sure, absolutely. But Auburn makes no sense for Lane Kiffin. And so even like I've told people this. I want to get your thoughts on this. If you tell me Lane Kiffin, if the football gods drop in and go, Lane Kiffin's the next coach at Auburn, I will tell you they gave him a historic, earth-shattering, if you will, industry-shaking contract.
And I would tell you it'll be his last coaching job if he went there. That is a coach's burial ground. Because and I've said it, and Auburn fans get really mad, Neil. But in football, even when you win, you lose. I watched Terry Bowden win his first 18 games. I covered it. There was still unrest. And the guy wins his first 18. Can you imagine if a coach came into the SEC now and won his first 18 games and there were still factions of the fan base and the booster base that didn't want him, that rejected him, that wanted to change? That's what happened in the 1990s, that he would be undermined and tape recorded by someone on his own staff. That's what happened in the 1990s. Well, listen, I'm telling you this. You covered the damn program. You know all the secrets. We both know too many in some respects in that state. That story for another day, folks.
Yeah, for sure.
This is no. Lane needs to wrap his arms around the program that has wrapped their arms around him, because Lane Kiffin's eccentric Twitter ways aren't acceptable and appreciated everywhere. Not every place would love Lane like Ole Miss does. They just wouldn't. And I don't think Lane fits at other places because he brings sex appeal to Ole Miss, a school that desperately needs a modern day man. If there's ever a program, the Ole Miss. But you've got the most modern day coach. It's just a beautiful fit, and what they're doing with the uniforms. And I mean, that program is as attractive as it has ever been. And it's not without Lane Kiffin. And Lane Kiffin's not as attractive if he doesn't have a program that's as supportive and backs him up like Ole Miss, or seems to back him up.
Man, you're the very best at this. I mean, I'm telling you, the SEC Network has made such a mistake, not just putting you in there and going, it's yours. But you're exactly right, because what Ole Miss gives Lane Kiffin, and this is nothing against Ole Miss. I've covered Ole Miss for 15 years. I've been around it most of my life. It's not an insult, just a fact, or at least my perception of a fact. Ole Miss kind of gives him a blank canvas to paint on, right? If you take the job at Auburn, you don't get a blank canvas. They're like, no. It's got to be orange right there. That's got to have an eagle over there.
That's right.
Yeah, no. Take your dog out. Put the tiger back in. Aubie goes there. And at Ole Miss, they're like, hey, you know what? We had this great history in the 50s and the 60s, and we're proud of it, and we're going to put it up in the stadium. But we know that we can't sell that now. Yeah, we've had some moments. Eli Manning, Houston Nutt had a good year. Hugh Freeze had a moment. We've had some moments we're proud of, but yeah, for the most part, we're just kind of faceless, nameless. And he came in and they're like, it's yours. Do what you want. Do it. You don't want to wear the gray pants? Cool. Don't wear them. You want to change the helmet? Change it. You want to do a camo helmet with Realtree? Do it. Sure. You want to bring your dog on the field? Probably against the rules, but do it. Yeah, and that's what they've said, right? And they're like, you want to, what do you want? Cool, we'll do it to the best of their ability. And I think this offseason, they're going to go, okay, we can't give you $100 million, but we can give you 60. And we're going to, you're the brand. I mean, he is the brand. And if he goes to any other place, not any other place, but most other places, like Georgia, for example, would not let Lane Kiffin be the brand. They already have a brand.
Florida wouldn't either. And that's why they went with somebody they thought they could control, and it's just not working.
It's not working. So I agree with you. And credit to Lane, and I can't remember what week it was, but it was early in the year. It may have been before the season even started. He said, in kind of one of those introspective moments, he said, I think Oxford and Ole Miss, um, I needed Oxford and Ole Miss more than it needed me. And I thought for him, a guy who I think has a considerable ego and deservedly so, I think for him that was kind of a real humble moment to admit that, hey, not everybody was going to take a chance on me. I mean, for some people, I was damaged goods, and Ole Miss gave me a chance at a time when, frankly, my life was in a state of somewhat disrepair. Lane didn't look good back then. He was kind of big. I think he was drinking. All of those things. He's completely changed. I mean, he looks great. He's super fit. I think if you're advising Lane Kiffin, the man, you would have to say, hey, look, be careful. You have something good here that's working for you. Maybe there's a time and a place. Maybe the NFL comes calling down the road and he goes, that's a scratch, an itch that I want to scratch. But I don't get the impression that he's just itching to get out the door right now.
Well, I look at you, Neil, for an example of this. I mean, you're a guy that could work anywhere in the country, whatever beat you want, any level, and you found a place that you loved, and you're enjoying the journey. It's not about trying to, the top tier, the highest paycheck you could draw, or the biggest market you could be. You realized at some point, you know what? I'm going to enjoy what I do. And it wasn't a matter of what school or, and I always admired you for that. And I know the Ole Miss fans certainly, love you and probably appreciate that and know how lucky they are that a guy like you is settling, in Oxford when you could be in any major metro covering any beat. And I think Lane needs to take a page out of that book and say, you know what? Life is good. I'm coaching football. I'm getting good quarterbacks in here. I've got a school that's behind me. I can be a contender. I mean, Ole Miss is sitting here right now, and I talked to Jeremy Pruitt on Monday nights. He does my pod. Jeremy says Arkansas is going to beat LSU. He thinks A&M could beat LSU too, by the way. Alabama may not be dead, but Ole Miss could be playing Alabama this weekend. That game could end up determining the West if LSU start. They're not out of it. They're not out of it. And I would have never thought that we could be talking about Ole Miss in contention for the West in November. Yeah. But here we are.
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I will say that while I would not put myself in the same category with Lane Kiffin in terms of anything like that, but the one thing that I do think is interesting, like people like you have asked me, hey, why'd you stay there so long? The big thing for me was there came a point, like when I first took this job, because you were in Knoxville at the time, and I can remember talking to you about it. I thought I'd made a critical error and quickly was trying to eradicate it. I was trying to get out of it. And what happened was family happened, and I just kind of realized that, well, this job is going to give me an opportunity to control my own schedule a little bit. It's going to give me an opportunity to see my kids more, to do more things with my kids. And I think over the course of time, my kids got comfortable here, and I didn't want to uproot them. And so, who knows, right? 3 years from now, when my son graduates high school, I mean, I've not made any secrets about it. I'm gonna explore a little bit because I think I owe myself that. And maybe I stay and do this another 10 years after that, or maybe I move. I don't know. But like with Lane, I do think it's interesting that his daughter came here in July or June, August, and she's a senior at Oxford High School. And there's a lot of talk about Knox, his son, coming here to start high school next year. Lane openly talked about going to an Oxford middle school game the other day against Tupelo. He actually, I think, questioned whether Tupelo was playing eligible players. It was kind of funny. I mean, he was being funny. He was Lane. And Tupelo High School, to their credit, had fun with it on social media as well. But I think you get a chance to be a dad. Oxford's a different kind of place in that it's a little quirky and it can be really pretentious. But Oxford also kind of leaves people alone, and they sort of let people do their thing. And I think Lane Kiffin gets to just sometimes, every once in a while, be Landry's dad, be Knox's dad in Oxford. I've told this story. I'll never forget it. One of the times that I was like, oh, this place is different. I was in Kroger. It was a couple of months after the New York Giants had won their second Super Bowl with Eli Manning. And Eli Manning and his wife are on like aisle 6 of Kroger, and people are leaving them alone. He's the reigning Super Bowl MVP. And one little boy nervously walked up to him and asked for an autograph. And Eli obliged him. He signed it. But it didn't lead to like a line of people. It was it. One time I kept crossing them because we were kind of, in a grocery store, you're going up and down. We were sort of in the same path. Right. And I left him alone. I never even said anything to them, but it was interesting. And I think Lane Kiffin kind of gets that here, even though he is an absolute rock star. Yeah. I think for the most part, people kind of let him be him, and they don't always demand that he be on. And then, I don't know. And like you said, here's what's interesting too, is that regardless of what happens with LSU, we're about to go into a 12-team playoff era. And last year, Ole Miss would have made the playoff.
Yeah.
And this year, right now, today, pending the results down the road, Ole Miss would be very much in the playoff picture. And you know this, Mike. You've covered sports a long time. If you make the playoffs, you got a shot. Maybe not a great shot, but a shot.
Yeah. Whether we like it or not, I was talking to Roy Kramer. I got a hold of the great SEC commissioner, 93 years old now, by the way. I called him a couple of weeks ago. We were doing some advanced work. One of the parts of the job of the media that, nobody likes, but we all knew Coach Dooley was in very dire condition. And so I was quietly calling people saying, look, this one looks pretty bad. Most people already knew. I said, we really want to make sure that we honor this man properly. And it's when people pass, those close, it's hard for them to pick up the phone and talk. Right. But if you say, I'm kind of doing this story, can you kind of give me some memories and some thoughts you've had with Vince, so that when it did come to pass, that we had a tribute story with a lot of the legends and people that have known Vince Dooley over the decades and understand what he meant to the league. And of course, Roy Kramer was certainly one of those men, the godfather of the SEC, the man most responsible for the league being a top college football, although could argue that's tenuous now with these television contracts that the Big Ten has signed. We'll see how all this turns out. But we talked about the playoff because Roy came up with the BCS. And a lot of people listening probably don't understand this, Neil. So I'm going to give just a kind of a brief history lesson here. So the struggle that we had in the 1990s, way back in the day, was that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 didn't want to get with the rest of the world. They had their Rose Bowl, and they didn't care if there was a unified championship. They had their event, and you guys can go on. And we had to sit there in 1997 and throw up our hands and go, oh, sure. Yeah, okay, Michigan would have beat Nebraska. Right. Well, technically, they split the national championship. And you're thinking, this is ridiculous. How can we not have a unified champion in today's day and age? And that's where the BCS came from. Somebody had to come up with a plan. Now, Roy was also the guy that started the SEC championship game, which in fact was really a half a step towards a playoff. Even though Gene Stallings didn't want it, Steve Spurrier didn't want it, they were telling Roy what to do with it, and he was telling them they could stick it back up their rear ends, and we're doing it, and this is how the SEC is going. Can you imagine somebody trying to tell Saban? No, they wouldn't. But that's how it was then. That's how much respect Roy Kramer commanded. And they went with it, and they said, wow, this works. And then everybody else went with the conference. Okay, so now Roy has got some equity because his conference champion. So now he is a voice and a leader. And he says to the Big Ten, what if I told you you could still have your Rose Bowl, and yet you could be part of a unified national championship? Well, how in the world are we going to do that? We're going to come up with a BCS rotation, and there's going to be a Rose Bowl. And the only way that your teams don't play in it, the top Pac-12 and the top Rose and the top Big Ten, is if you're one of the one or two teams in this predetermined computer formula that's going to use three different formulas that are all a little bit different. Anderson and Hester is going to be based on the schedule model. Sagarin is going to be based on scores and transitive properties. I don't think we've ever figured out what the New York Times was based on, Neil, but they had a really big name in front of it. So everybody went, oh, it's New York Times. It's got to make sense. Yeah. The lady, I used to call her on Sundays. I'm like, how does it work? I don't know. I just put the numbers in. Okay. Okay, that was who was in charge. Anyway, so you had this predetermined formula that determined the national, and everybody down. Okay, we're all playing by the same rules, man. We got to schedule better. We got to win by bigger margins, although they're going to make Sagarin cap the scoring margin at 35, so don't get too crazy with it, Bob Stoops. And this is what it is. And the BC, and every week we'd sit around and we'd wait. And then I figured out how to game the system, and TV's Mike Griffith is projecting the BC. There were 3 computer ranks. It wasn't that hard. Now they got bigger. They got to go more sophisticated. Yeah. We go 7, we go 8. But the bottom line was, and Roy Kramer would later explain this to me, he took out the regionalism. Oh, by the way, the polls were part of that too. They would combine the AP top 25 and USA. But he took out the regionalism in the human element because Roy understood, having been a part of the NCAA basketball tournament committee one time, which he said was the most miserable experience he'd ever been a part of. You would think with 64 teams back then, everybody would be happy, but they were even worse than there was when there was 2. So the point was, he took the human element out. Somebody being television executives, figured out, let's put together this 13-member committee, right? We're gonna appoint these 13 wise men, i.e. human beings that we can control to manipulate and get the matchups we want. Because if it's a predetermined formula, we can't touch it. But if it's human beings, we can talk to the right people and they can influence the process. How dare you suggest, Mike Griffith, that these men of integrity would do anything that wasn't good for the sport, would put themselves above their fellow man instead of doing what's great? You mean like the Oklahoma AD that cut the backdoor deal to stab an entire conference? And that man of great integrity? And I'm supposed to wonder if maybe he might have had a wee bit of an agenda in 2018 to manipulate the members around him. And oh, by the way, the Florida AD was on that committee too. I'm sure he was real excited to vote for Georgia. Oh, and the Georgia Tech AD, he was on the 2018. I'm sure he was pushing real hard for the Georgia Bowl. Give me a break. So you had people who had conflicts of interest. You had television executives, and don't tell me they're not there. They're trying to influence the matchups. Of course they are. They want to bring value to the brand. It's the name of the game. It's what we all do. It's why I'm on your podcast, and it's why I talk to you. You add value to me because you, Neil McCready, are a commodity. It's no different in any walk of life. I want to do your show. It brings value to me, vice versa. You like my opinion. It's no different anywhere else. So
you're bringing lots of value right now, Mike.
Tell me that this committee is above all. Oh, well, they're so smart. They're so smart, Neil, that they had Tennessee number 1 last week and Georgia number 3. How did that play out? Wait a minute. No, well, yeah. You saw their number 1 team get destroyed. You saw their number 2 team trailing at Northwestern 7-0 in the second quarter and only scored 21 points against a 1-8 football. That's their number 2. Oh, the committee. Oh, but this can change. Listen, I don't even want to see the rank. People, what do you think is going to happen? I don't care, because it doesn't matter. I took the bait. You had me there for a little while. I don't care. Wake me up on December 4th.
Absolutely.
Because that's all that matters.
I was walking into the pavilion at Ole Miss to cover an exhibition basketball game. And when the first rankings were coming out on that Tuesday night, and Kyle Campbell, the longtime Ole Miss SID, was like, hey, where do you think Ole Miss is going to be? And I'm like, does it matter? I mean, you're going to play all these games. This is nothing more. And listen, I don't blame them. They need TV money. They got to put something on the screen. They need something they can talk about the next day and debate. I get it. I get the model. And you gotta have material to make the model go. 100% understand it. Doesn't make me want to watch it, but I get it. But everybody's like hung up on it. I'm like, well, Tennessee and Georgia are going to play. And Michigan and Ohio State are going to play. And Alabama and LSU got to play. And then Alabama's got to play Ole Miss. And then LSU's got to play other games. And it's all going to work out, because it always all kind of works out. Like TCU's got to play games. And if they win all these games, like Clemson's got to go to Notre Dame. I was like, who knows? I mean, it's all going to typically work out. And then, but we're going to a 12-team playoff where, frankly, it's going to be really hard to completely screw that up. Like, there might be some seeding issues or whatever, and we might have we absolutely will have a real debate about who's 11 and who's 12, and are they really better than 13 or 14? But Mike, those teams are going to have losses. right? So those teams are going to have lost games where we can go, well, Ole Miss, maybe you should have gotten in, but you know what? You shouldn't have lost by 25 at LSU, or hey, I'm just making something up. Florida, maybe you belonged in, but you know what? That weird game where you lost at Missouri, you shouldn't have.
So
it's going to work out.
So Kramer's point was on going to 12 teams is that this really isn't the best way to determine the best team. This is a way to determine a tournament champion.
Exactly.
Like the NCAA tournament. How many times, Neil, have we said the best team didn't win the NCAA? And sometimes they do. Sometimes back in the day when Coach K was, doing whatever he did, to get players and talk about hypocrisy. Duke was.
Not to interrupt you, but real quick. I mean, in this town, look, Ole Miss doesn't want to admit it out loud because they won the baseball championship and they got super hot and it was a great story. But they were the last team into the tournament. Was Ole Miss the best team in college baseball last year? No, Tennessee probably was. But, Ole Miss won the tournament. And
it turned it into a tournament sport.
It turned into a tournament sport. And hey, America loves tournaments.
But the only thing I'll say that the saving grace that in Greg Sankey is brilliant. And so was Mike's Live. And the beautiful thing about the SEC, and I was talking to Coach Kramer about this too, is that everybody was great for their era. Roy Kramer was tremendous at a time when the SEC needed unification and ideas and an ability to raise its profile, because I'd wake up and read those rankings and I'd go, oh, they did it to the SEC again. They really did. It's hard to imagine, but there was a time when the SEC didn't have this national respect. It always defaulted, right? You remember, you grew up same, and it kind of upset, So then comes Slive with the marketing, which is brilliant because now you've got the programs, but you got to be able to market it. And Slive kind of started the turnaround for best. And then Sankey, more the man of the people. Now these coaching salaries are just ballooning and just ridiculous, where the coaches have the power because money is power and power is money. And so you got to have a guy that all these coaches, for all their money and all their power, or all their rage in the case of Jimbo Fisher, and all their social media sophistication and obnoxiousness in the case of Lane Kiffin, you got to have one guy that everybody agrees is the smartest guy in the room. I might have more money than you. I might be more powerful than you. I might be angrier than you. I might be able, but you know what, Greg Sankey, you are just so damn smart. We all got to pull out the dictionary every time. How many syllables did that word have? Did I spell that right? And I don't think he tries to be.
No, he's just.
I think Greg's the quiet guy in the back of the room that was never cool. And he grew up and became so successful, and everybody's realizing what a prize he is. And he's at the party. Greg Sankey, you've arrived. You're in the middle of the party that you never got invited to growing up while you were studying and hitting the books and becoming this incredible intellectual. And now you're the leader of the most powerful conference, and everybody agrees to listen to you. You're the smart guy that says, hey, guys, really, you need to go home. Okay? It's time to turn out the lights. Or, no, that seems like a good idea, guys, but you really don't want to do that. Right. He's just done an unbelievable job leading this conference, Neil. This is such a great time for the league with all these personalities and dynamics. And I just Lane is a part of the fabric, bringing it back home to where we started. I don't want to, there was a time when Lane left Tennessee. It's just the truth. It was a complete mess. You know what he was? It was a messy breakup. He was the boyfriend that broke your daughter's heart and was horrible to her. And you said, I never want to see that kid in my house again. That guy was terrible. And 3 years later, she's still crying, i.e. investigation that lasted 3 years and ruined the next two boyfriends, right? But Lane's remade himself. And now, I want more Lane Kiffin, more cowbell, more Lane Kiffin. That's what I say. I wouldn't have said that 10 years ago. But now Lane's all grown up, right? At least appears to be. And he's doing things with a different tone. He's still a guy you got to keep your eye on, but he's doing things in more of a fun, less destructive way. He's not, he's not egging houses anymore, Neil. He's toilet papering. He's not leaving lasting damage. I like where Lane is at. I like the color that he adds. And most importantly, I like his teams. Ole Miss is exciting to watch.
Can they beat Alabama Saturday?
Yes, absolutely. They can. But which Alabama?
So yeah,
because
so
I'm
let me
going to
ask you
tell
this,
you,
because this Saban thing is fascinating, right? I mean, they always play consequential games, week after week, year after year, decade after decade. As crazy as that sounds, now, I mean, look, I guess it's conceivable that LSU could lose to Arkansas and Texas A&M. Respectfully, to Coach Pruitt, I disagree. I think LSU is going to win out, but it's conceivable that they lose. And if they do, then Alabama could eke back into it. But realistically, Alabama's out of the title picture. Realistically, Alabama's not playing in the playoff. They're not playing for the national championship. That's realistically at this point. It would take a miracle. And if that's the case, do they play with the same edge? Do they play with the same focus? Do they play with the same, spirit? I don't know the answer to that because we haven't seen a Nick Saban team be put in that position in 10 years.
yeah, that's a great point. It happened to Georgia a couple of years ago in 2020 when the SEC, the men of great integrity, instead of just taking the next two games that were supposed to be on the schedule, just threw a brand new schedule together. And Florida's not going to have to play Alabama this year after all, just because. Okay. And Georgia's supposed to finish the year playing Vanderbilt, and Florida finishes against Tennessee. What a coincidence. So not trying to say they didn't set up Florida to win the East or anything like that. But anyway, Georgia got knocked out. Now, they had some circumstances, guy getting a motorcycle wreck, Jordan Davis gets hurt. Anyway, they lose, they're out. And now for the first time since 2016, Georgia's playing regular season games that aren't of conference championship consequence. So what's going to happen? Well, I'll tell you what, Mississippi State fans are going, we can tell you what happened. Can I answer? We held Georgia to 8 yards rushing in Sanford Stadium, but this JT Daniels guy comes out of nowhere, hadn't played in a year and a half, and he throws for 401 yards. And that guy at Alabama, they can't catch passes. They apparently was trying to knock a camera out of a girl's hands, but everybody said he hit her. That guy, he caught 197 yards worth of balls and 8 catches. That's what happened. One guy came riding in on a white horse and saved the night. Or Georgia probably goes down the tubes and doesn't have a top 10 season. But JT Daniels arrived and was balling. Now, does Alabama have a catalyst? Oh, Bryce Young, not so coincidentally, went to the same school as JT, modern day. Bryce Young is gold. He is one of these people.
For sure.
And there's not many of them. We run like Tim Tebow. We talk about these student athletes that are just, they're all very good. You have to understand everybody's good and starters are great. And then, and all SEC are elite. But you get these special halo, Sean Alexander, special guys that are just magical. Bryce Young is magical. He really is. And he's surrounded by, I don't know, think about if it wasn't for Bryce Young. They lose to A&M. They lose to Tech. You could be talking about a 4 or 5 loss team right now, Neil.
Oh, for sure. They would have. Well, they definitely would have lost to Texas. They definitely would have lost to Texas A&M. They wouldn't have jumped out ahead of Arkansas. So who knows what happens that day? But they'd be a 4-loss team for sure.
No doubt. So the question becomes, how does Alabama respond? And then the other questions, like, so one of the benefits of talking to Pruitt is it's like it's like cracking the code, right? This is the guy that can interpret, what Nick Saban is thinking, because he's been in the lock and he knows Kirby. And that's why Jeremy's such a great guest, because he's sat in those rooms for hours and he knows how these guys think. And after losses, Nick is very positive, he says, and gets everybody's mind right. And you just have to wonder, to your point, though, now that after that LSU game was so devastating, and how brilliant of Brian Kelly not to put the ball back in Bryce Young's hands, knowing that that's the best player in college football. I don't care who wins the Heisman Trophy. Give me the first pick. I'm taking Bryce Young. And if you could let me pick any college player, slightly ahead of Jalen Carter, because Bryce touches the ball. But Brian Kelly can say what he wants. Well, I thought my team, I thought this. No, coach, you didn't want to put it back in that guy's hands. And that was smart. Great coaches will tell you, whether we're talking about baseball, softball, whatever, never let the other team's best player beat you. And Bryce Young was not on the field, and that was LSU's chance to win. He took it. He won. So what happens next? A lot of this is going to be determined by Bryce Young and how Bryce responds. So far, he's been a champion. A lot of this is going to be determined by Pete Golding. and what happens in that meeting with Nick Saban. And I mean, there's some talented guys over there, Neil. I mean, this wasn't supposed to happen to Alabama this year.
No.
And a lot of this has to do with Ole Miss.
I've had people come at me and go, man, you said this was going to be Saban's best team. And I'm like, well, you have to understand, I didn't make that up. That was something that was coming. That was something that was coming out of that building in Tuscaloosa. That's
what we saw. We saw it in the championship game. We thought, well, they're going to, the Jahmyr Gibbs, he's been everything he's supposed to be, but the receiver part is where the disconnect has been. And when you're not scoring 30 and 40 points, all of a sudden, all those warts on your defense, Will Anderson, big play. Yeah, the other team's playing from 2 and 3 touchdowns behind. You're going to get a few sacks. But when your offense isn't lighting it up with the consistency and your defense is giving up explosives and not making them earn it, I mean, my goodness, could their game plan against Tennessee have been any worse? Now, they got a bad break. They didn't get exactly an officiating crew that let them play back there, and it took everything to go wrong. It took very poor clock management. It took a missed field goal by 3 feet, another field goal that got partially blocked. It took a cast like a plane crash. It's never one thing. It's a lot of things had to go wrong, and here we are. And to your point, Lane, I'm telling you, man, Lane could be coaching for an SEC championship game appearance. I mean, I'm that line's only 2.5 points, LSU at Arkansas, Neil.
What is it about that LSU-Arkansas game that I'm missing? You guys are all smarter than me, and I'll admit that out loud. I watched a good bit of Arkansas-Liberty the other day, and Arkansas was just ineffective offensively pretty much the entire game. The strength of their team has been the offensive front. They were having a hard time communicating. If you made me guess, I would guess KJ Jefferson's hurt. Sanders is a terrific back. Frankly, I don't think he gets enough credit for how good he is. Defensively, they've improved a little bit, but they're still a mess. What is it about that matchup in Fayetteville that makes people so confident that Arkansas can beat LSU?
Operative words, in Fayetteville. Right? They're not in Tiger Stadium under the lights playing Alabama. You're not going to be able to match that intensity. You're not going to be able to match that focus. It's going to be harder to take Arkansas serious after they just lost to Liberty. And if you're Arkansas, I think you and I would agree, Sam Pittman is a special man. He is a very good coach. He is that is a program that in 3 short years, it's not like they've turned it around and they're filled with 5 stars. That's not how they were beating teams. That's not how they got in the top 10. They got in the top 10 with synergy, with the being greater than the sum of all the parts. They got in the top 10 because they're a community team. And say what you want about Northwest Arkansas. I used to detest it. I went up there this year and I said, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. This is the future. It's happening here. This place is happening. I would invest in Northwest Arkansas. Bigger and better things are going to happen. They will be bankrolled. They have the corporate sponsors in place. They have the famous alumni, and they have the coach that unifies all of them. And this is a perfect opportunity in a rivalry game to reach up and pull LSU back down.
And this has been probably a soul-searching week and, a gut check week. And they had a couple of kids arrested on Saturday night. I mean, I'm going to guess that he had their attention on Sunday in the meeting room. Now there's some friction between he and Kendall Briles. I think there's accuracy to that. There's talk about, are they playing KJ stubbornly when the other kid maybe needs to come in and play since KJ's not healthy? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know their roster as well as other people do, but I'm interested in it. I've watched LSU. I saw them in person in Baton Rouge a couple of weeks ago, and then I watched obviously on television against Alabama, and boy, Jaden Daniels is going to give Arkansas's defense.
He's amazing, but you know what, Neil? I watched him at Auburn, and they were down 17-0 in the middle of the second quarter, and if Auburn doesn't fumble, and I watched him get housed by Tennessee.
It's a crazy sport, isn't it?
And I love me some Brian Kelly. I think he's a fantastic coach, but LSU is a different place. And I don't know that the culture is where it needs to be quite yet. We haven't seen the consistent. I was all in on LSU. I was like, LSU. Oh, here they go. And then Tennessee just bulldozed them. And that's what happens when you're trying to build so I'm not sold yet because, it's not like they beat an Alabama team that A&M had Alabama on the road. Texas, this is not vintage Alabama. The Alabama that you beat in Tiger Stadium under the lights, which is worth 10, 13 points? That is not a vintage. And by the way, you needed a lost 2-point conversion play. I mean, that was not a vintage Bama. So this is not the same Alabama. And so that's part of what, kind of goes into my thinking. And so the fact that LSU beat them, I don't know that necessarily, inflates, LSU's playing good ball, and I'm with you on Jaden Daniels. He beat Justin Herbert as a true freshman when he was at Arizona State, actually knocked Oregon out of the playoffs. I mean, he's a gamer. I love this kid. But those Hogs, I'll tell you, they're hard-nosed. They're going to play with pride. They're not a team that's not, a lot of programs you lose, you're not playing for anything, it's over. But that's a program that doesn't go away. And I'll give them credit. The COVID year, Arkansas didn't cancel any games. Some of these coaches and programs, Neil, they took the easy way out. I fully believe that. I'm not going to call out Jimbo Fisher's name and say that he did that in the bowl game. All right. I'm not going to call out
the regular season against Ole Miss. Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to call out Vanderbilt and mention how they canceled twice on Georgia, but managed to play a game with Tennessee in between. I'm not going to call those people out, but some people took the easy way out, and Arkansas was one of them that didn't. And Sam Pittman, by God, he's a man. When he had his job interview and they came to interview him, it was cookies and milk. I'm not kidding you. His wife made his special chocolate chip cookies, and they had cookies and milk on the table for the job. That's Sam damn Pitt. There's something about this guy who serves cookies and milk, but he'll bury you 6 feet deep in a minute. I don't know how to explain the dynamic. He belongs on Ozark. He should have been a character on Ozark. We're going to the house to see Sam, and he's this gentle man. And you look in the backyard and you say, is that a hand sticking out of the ground? Because there's something about the guy that he's lovable and wonderful, but his players rip your head off on Saturdays.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You're awesome. All right, last thing. You're covering Georgia. You saw them win a championship a year ago. You saw them kind of ride the roller coaster a little. They look like they're cruising right now. Is this a championship team? Because Mike, I'll be honest, I watched the landscape, and I'm like, well, everybody talks about Ohio State, but every time I watch them, I'm like, I don't know. People talk about Michigan. I think Michigan's actually pretty good. They passed the eye test. We've talked about the 3 teams in the West that could potentially get there, whether it's LSU or Ole Miss or I guess conceivably Alabama. None of those teams look like they're ready to really challenge Georgia in a championship game. Is there anyone out there that, if you're a Georgia fan, you're fearing right now? Or is it just you fear yourself?
This opinion does not make me popular with Georgia fans, and I don't voice it very often. So don't tell anybody I said this.
Just us.
Last year's Georgia and this year's Georgia, they don't come close to 2019 LSU or 2020 Alabama or even 2018 Clemson. But they don't have to. They only have to be the best amid this landscape. And the fact of the matter is, this landscape, the greatness, the teams are more leveled out. NIL's been a factor. It's harder than ever to maintain focus through a season. And yes, at the end of the day, Georgia has more 5-stars. But more importantly, and this is where I sound like a big water carrier, it's Kirby Smart, Neil. This guy keeps these guys sharp. I mean, he keeps an edge. There was audio that leaked last week from Georgia, which is hilarious, because you go to Georgia practice and Kirby's on this microphone the whole time and he's dogging out everybody. And there ought to be like parental advisory warnings like within a block of the Sanford Stadium practice facility, because you're going to hear some things. And no, that's not the 82nd Airborne training. That is a head football coach trying to get the attention of 18 to 22-year-olds and let them know in no uncertain terms that level of execution is not going to be accepted. But he doesn't exactly use those words. And so this audio leaked of Kirby's alphabet soup of motivation. And Tennessee, oh, look at that. We got him worried. Oh, he's not confident. He's dog. It's like, no, that's just another day at the office out there, guys. Yeah. So that when you get in front of 90,000 and it's static noise and there's confusion and madness, you're accustomed to this. Now, I'm going to say this. I was a very, very fortunate young man to serve in the military at a peacetime where I never had to be deployed. I'm not one of the American heroes that went overseas and had to put their life on the line. I was trained to, I was prepared to, I lived that life as a paratrooper for 3 years. The phone rings, I got to be anywhere in the world in 24 hours. And let me tell you, I was of a mindset that I wanted the phone to ring. That's how I was prepared. Now, some people say, don't compare the military to football. No, it's kind of the same. And not to insult, again, the veterans that served, that sacrificed. I had the highest regard. I was ready to die for the flag on my show. I still am. Is it brave? No, I just realized there's a greater good. That's a whole nother show. But the point of the matter is, I was in it for my brother, and I was in it for the flag, and I was in it for the team, and I was willing to make the sacrifice, and I was prepared to make the sacrifice. And I didn't think about my well-being. I thought about what I was trained to do. If that phone rang, I knew exactly how it was going to go down. These guys train every day, and they know exactly how it's got to go down. And because they have that belief and buy-in in their football coach, and all you got to do is look at the NFL draft. There were 15 guys that marched across the stage from Georgia. And if you follow the same trail and the same training regimen, you have a chance to be one of those guys. So the level of buy-in is unbelievable. And that's first and foremost for any coach, whether we're talking Pat Summitt, Bruce Pearl, Terry Bowden, Lane Kiffin, Nick Saban, Sam Pittman. You've got to have the level of buy-in. And when you put that level of buy-in, the Georgia and Kirby Smart and the momentum they've built, and you put that together, man, that gives you a big margin for error. That gives you a margin for error that when you're down 10 at Missouri and you should lose that game because your quarterback's not playing well and Missouri struck the right game plan at the right time on the right Saturday, and somehow you win that game, right? Because you've got enough level. You never gave in. You never gave it a second thought. You never questioned your coach. You never said, I'm going to try something. No. You stayed in the system, just like the plan against Tennessee. Do you realize Tennessee didn't have a gain longer than 17 yards until there was 4.5 minutes left and the game was over? And it went for 28. Incredible. That is unbelievable. Nobody's talking about the hurry up defense. That doesn't sell. The College Football Playoff Committee, boo Corrigan. What kind of name is that? Like, how bad does your real name have to be if you go by Boo? Like, did your wife give you that name and it sounded kind of sweet, so you went with it? Dude, that's not cool. I don't know. Boo. What, goes for Halloween every year? Where do you get that name? But so there's Boo. Boo will be out there talking to us tonight, by the way. But the point is, yes, I don't see another team. There would have to be a team with sinners. So let me throw some darts out there. Maybe Tennessee gets hot and gets that 4th spot, and they get the revenge factor. Maybe, and they get them in a dome. Maybe Clemson changes court. Hey, Dabo, line 1, change quarterbacks. Good God, man, it's not that hard. You're not smarter than the world on this one. I don't care how much you're paying the kid. I don't care about the pipeline to LA. The best guy's not playing. Put him in. Let's say they put him in. They start winning big, and everybody goes, oh, this is a different Clemson. We're going to put them over Tennessee as the 4th team if they win. Maybe Clemson gets hot. I don't know. What about LSU? What if this voodoo? Maybe Brian Kelly made a deal with a palm reader when he got down there, and LSU catches magic and Jaden Daniels. Could they pull the 2001 circa LSU Tennessee up? I don't think so. But Michigan, no chance. Listen, let me tell you, there is nothing Kirby Smart wants than to kick Michigan's ass again. He had to hear John Harbaugh in the offseason say that there's 2 programs that prepare players better for the NFL better than anyone: Alabama and Michigan. Okay, John, your Ravens were losing 6 games in a row. You lost. You probably didn't watch the game. You called your brother Jim and said, how did it go? We lost, but we prepare players better than Georgia for the NFL. Got it. I mean, listen, Michigan ain't going to be that team, man. Ohio State, you would have thought could have been that team because of Stroud, but they don't have the same. They got good receivers, but not last year's Ohio State. Yes. When Kirby Smart was coming off the field, DJ Shockley told me this. He's the color guy for he does the color analyst for Georgia. After every game, Kirby would say, "How did Ohio State do today?" That was the team. That was the team that Georgia was concerned with, was Ohio State. Not this year. I mean, I'm not saying they're not concerned with them, but that's not necessarily the case this year. So, to your question, I guess it's Georgia. I don't see anybody else, Neil. Don't see it.
I agree with you. So if anybody's going, he's a homer, I'm like, nah, he's right. I don't think you're being a homer at all. I've watched. I'm trying to like find the team that I'm like, okay, that's the team that could beat Georgia. And the only team.
I got one. Now, Oregon in a rematch. Now, this is crazy. You say, wait.
Oh, really?
Do you realize Oregon did not go 3-and-out till the fourth quarter? Oregon outrushed Georgia. Oregon did not give up a sack. The scoreboard did not, and Reese Davis said this the other day. Even though that was 49-3, Georgia was every bit as dominant, if not more so, against Tennessee in 27-13 as they were against Oregon at 49-3. Oregon had turnovers on 2 of their first 3 drives, got behind, and Georgia was incredibly proficient on their scoring touchdowns on the first 7 drives. First time that happened in the SEC in 4 or 5 years. So, and they game planned Dan. And Dan's still like learning. Now, what was your name again? First game of the season?
Yeah, he's still learning. First game with that team. Yeah, sure.
So could Oregon, what about USC? Caleb Williams. That guy's pretty daggone good. But
he's good.
I have a hard time believing they have but to your point, I'd say by default, right? I can't think of anybody else. And Georgia's just so focused, and Kirby does such a great job keeping really the whole staff. I mean, he's got Todd Monken they're running an NFL offense. They're playing chess, not checkers. They're changing plays at the line of scrimmage. There are not many teams that can do what they do in their offensive scheme, where they can change protections, routes, and go to the line with a pass and a run call. You could be in the right defense and be wrong. And then on the flip side, Will Muschamp, say what you want about a head coach, fantastic defensive mind, fantastic. So they're dialed in, man. I never would have thought this. I'm like, am I going to have to do a book? Do I have to? If they win 2, do I have to do a book? Because it's like all these backstories. Like, I don't think people really realize how much has gone into this, because it's not just rolling 5 stars out there and winning, like the Stetson Bennett story. Like, I don't know if he starts for any other team in the league at the beginning of the year. I don't know if another program says, I'll trade you my guy for Stetson. But here he is, looking fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we were doing the whole Heisman thing the other day, and I was like, well, I mean, it's not Bryce Young anymore. It's not Anderson. We talked about that before the year. It's not him. Maybe it's Bo Nix. Maybe it's CJ Stroud. Someone brought up, trying to think, what was the other name? The kid at North Carolina. I'm like, yeah, but he's a little late to the party. Probably didn't arrive in time. Maybe it is Stetson Bennett. Maybe Stetson ends up winning a Heisman by default. I mean,
he'll at least be in New York. He will be in that room. There's no doubt that his story has to end. It just, sometimes things just happen. It's like watching a NASCAR race. I wonder how Dale Earnhardt Jr. is going to do in the second race at Daytona this year. Sometimes things just have a way of working out. I think Stetson Bennett's going to be sitting in New York as a finalist. I don't think he's going to win it, but I think he's going to be in that room. That's just the way the movie's got to end. I mean, it's just that's, and then, he rides off into the Los Angeles sun. I mean, it's like, of course, that's what's going to, even though that's the most improbable, illogical, irrational, inconceivable thought any of us could have had when he was the 4th-string quarterback in the spring of 2021, who threw exactly 4 passes and went to the coach's office and said, am I even going to get to compete? And Kirby said, sure, I'll move you up to number 3. Okay, now he's number 3. And then JT goes down, and Kirby says Monday that Carson Beck is my number 2. But then Carson has a bad practice that day, so Stetson becomes the number 2. And then he's announced on the scoreboard as the starter, and everybody boos before the UAB game against this Bill Clark guy that Kirby saw. Oh, this is one of the greatest minds. This is one of the greatest people. Oh, my God, they're going to be – and Bill Clark can't figure out that bunch formation that they always run out of. Well, guess what, Bill? Not today. And they're going to fool you with it once, twice, 3 times, and he's going to throw 5 touchdowns in the first half on UAB. And they're all wide open. And your mom could complete the – and you're going, that's the legendary coach that you – yes, time to retire, Bill. It is. And Stetson Bennett now has this launch point and and ties the school record in 1 half. And then Kirby plays him the next, and he takes JT out after 3 series again. Why'd you put Well, he just deserved to play. Kirby said, the head coach has an idea. The seed has been planted. And when the head coach sees something a certain way, Neil, it's going to be hard. It's like when I was working with Spurrier last year. So we do this Steve Spurrier Coaching Award. I called him a couple of years ago. I say, I've got this first-year Coach of the Year award, and I've had it since 2000. I don't have a name on it. Would you like to? Yep, sounds pretty good. The 1990 Gators, we really should have won the SEC. I'm going to tell you what happened. They kind of took it away from us, and they really shouldn't have, but it was kind of an agreement to blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now he's got a reason, and he's excited. And so last year, we're trying to decide, okay, well, we got Shane Beamer, coach. We got Josh Heupel. We got to sort this out. Shane's a good one. Yeah, 4 different quarterbacks. One with 4 different quarterbacks. Oh, yeah, that was good. Now, Heupel, he's interesting. Now, that is interesting. That is very interesting off. I like what he's doing. I'm thinking, how'd they lose to Purdue? I said, well, coach, we got to pick one. No, you know what? No, we don't. No, we don't. No, we really do. Because we have 2 coaches from the same league in the same division, and this isn't going to look good. Because you're from the same. This is now, Mike. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have 2 winners because they deserve it, and people are going to like it, and that's what we're going to do. And I called Doring. He said, "Did you talk to Coach?" I said, "Chris Doring is responsive." I said, "Yeah, I talked to him. What did he say?" He said, "What we're going to do." And Chris, that's what I thought. That Coach is going to do what Coach is going to do. So if you're going to have the Steve Spurrier Award, don't have any illusions. There's not going to be a rubber stamp. There's not going to be a sign off. The head coach is going to decide who the winners are. Yeah. And Kirby had decided who his quarterback was, unbeknownst to the rest of us. He liked this kid and his guts and his stick-to-itness and his playmaking ability and having a mobile quarterback. He recognized the problems. And even though he was still a little rough around the edges, Kirby knew that he could do just enough, especially with that defense they had on the other side. Just don't mess it up. Just don't mess it up, Stat. Make enough plays, show me that grit, bring that mobility to the table, and don't mess it up. And JT's in reserve. And here's the good news. If you start Stat, you know you can bring JT in, and JT can still bring you the firepower. If you start JT, Stat hadn't done so good coming off the bench. Pick on first series, South Carolina, so you play one, you have both. You play the other, you only have one. So it was the perfect play for Kirby, and it made sense. And I said during the offseason, I was, well, that's, you can't because he's not. And then a different Stetson Bennett came out this year, Neil. He worked on his intermediate throws. He worked on his footwork. He became more familiar with the offense. Monken designed a scheme around him. And lo and behold, this year's version is legit. Last year it was, hey, just don't mess it up. They can win despite them. Hand it off, throw the deep ball. Don't ask him. This year, though, Stetson Bennett's legit, man. He's bona fide. I'll be the first to say that. Last year, I wasn't all in, and I was critical. I said I think the other guy's better.
You were. Yeah, you were.
And I still think the other guy was better last year. But this year, this guy's been great. He's done a great. Now he's had a couple rough moments, but when he's needed, like that Tennessee game, I thought he was outstanding. I tip my cap to Stetson Bennett. He played great. Let's see how he does. The cowbells will be ringing. It's a little bit different environment. Awful dark. They say it's not the end of the world, but you can see the end of the world from Starkville. People say, you going on a trip? I said, I'm not going on that trip. It's not baseball season. I'm staying home and watching out. This is the one game I'm not going because I've been there. And it's nice, and don't take it personal. But I've got, it's Starkville, and I'll go to Kentucky next week. But it is what it now. If it was Oxford, I'm in. I want to see the Grove. I want to see land. I want to see the uniform. I want to see it all. Starkville, no, I'll pass on the chicken fried steak this weekend. Thank you.
Mike, you could run for governor of couldn't run for governor of Mississippi anymore, but you could run for mayor of Oxford and win an absolute runaway right now.
Is there anything about Mike Leach anymore, by the way, that's funny? Is there anything left? Because
no, it's a tired act.
It is.
It's a tired act. I think when they hired him, they thought he would counterbalance Kiffin.
Yeah. And
if anything, he's elevated Kiffin.
I mean, I even asked Kirby, I said, you've coached against, what is there anything interesting or odd or eccentric about what he does now, or, beyond the, it's a good way. You said it, but it's a tired act. It's like an old comedian that goes out and you say, there was a time when people thought this guy was funny. You ever watch some of the old comedy clips and you hear how they tell these bad jokes and everybody's laughing and saying, did we used to think Happy Days was funny? Did we think, is that fun? Was that really? Because
back then it was. When we were kids, we watched Happy Days and you watched the Fonz and you're like, is he going to make it over the shark? But now everything's modernized now, and you watch it and you're like, man, I've seen Breaking Bad. I watched The Office. I'm not watching that crap.
That's like the Mike Leach show.
Yep.
Oh, we've got a hilarious interview we're going to bring you with Mike Leach, and he's going to talk about Halloween candy. Like, who thinks that's funny? Is somebody's grandparents laughing at this? Like, this is like, I'm sorry, but at one point, like that name was on the cutting edge of this and that. But now they didn't score till what, their last possession against Alabama, right?
Yeah.
I just, and so I don't know what to say. I mean, maybe he's a good quarterback, but if you're Mississippi State, and here's another question for you. This is you, maybe you can answer this. So Auburn hired the Mississippi State AD, right?
Yeah, John Cohen. I think it was a third choice.
Yeah, but I was gonna okay, so but why? So what has Mississippi State done that's better than Auburn? You can say football, but in terms of all the other athletic programs, is there any groundbreaking ideas here? Is it?
You know what? And you know what about the Cohen thing that's interesting to me? And I've kept you way too long, but this is interesting, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Cohen, he's come in, and they had to make in their press release, hey, John Cohen's coming in, and it's going to be his program, and we promised him autonomy. I'm not making fun of like Mandel or Tamil or whoever wrote that. That's what they said to him. He just reported it. Why do you have to say that out loud? What does that mean? And then even like we're taping this on Tuesday. There's stories breaking that Cohen says, well, I mean, when we hire a football coach, I'll be the one that signs off on. I have the last word. Okay, why do you have to say that out loud? Why is that? Yeah, because you're saying it so profoundly because you're almost trying to talk it into existence. The truth is Jimmy Rain's going to hire your football coach. The boosters are going to hire your football coach, and you're just going to be the guy at the press conference that says, ladies and gentlemen, Coach X, his lovely wife, Tiffany, their children, Billy, Jenny, Janie, ladies and gentlemen, War Eagle. I mean, that's it. Okay, cool. Yeah, you're going to wear a nice tie, and it's going to be orange and blue stripe, and you're going to bring them in, and the coach is going to stand up, and you're going to introduce. But you didn't hire him. You're telling me that they're going to go spend. I mean, they're dropping these Dan Lanning rumors. Dan Lanning's not leaving Oregon for Auburn today. Look, here's the thing about Auburn. And I covered Auburn. Auburn's great. But when Auburn wins, and they've won, they've had periods where they really won. Alabama was mortal. Georgia was good, but Georgia was mortal, right? They were just a good program. Georgia was solid. You didn't want to schedule Georgia, but you didn't fear them. Alabama had Dennis Franchione or Mike Shula or Mike Dubose, guys that did good things. They were fine. They didn't scare you. They didn't revolutionize the sport. It wasn't Nick Saban. And so now the Auburn job, you walk into it today, and the guy that you got to play every year over there just across the state line is running the preeminent program in the country, probably about to repeat as national champ. The guy that's still in your state has won, 7 titles, 8 titles? I don't know. He's played for 50 titles in the last 12 years. I mean, he won even a year last year when he didn't win the national championship. He kicked Georgia's ass for the SEC championship. I mean, people that are like, oh, well, the dynasty's over. Kiffin, to his credit, was like, hey, don't do that. It's goat fuel. Stop.
Yeah, I love that.
And I was great. Such a funny deal. I was the guy sitting there right in front of him laughing out loud. He was looking at me like, stop laughing. You're going to make me laugh. And I couldn't. It cracked me up. I'd never heard goat fuel before I started laughing. But he's right. And so you walk into that job, and that's the first 2 things that you're up against. Well, that's a hell of a big mountain to climb. And then you've got Brian Kelly at LSU, and you've got you've got whatever Texas A&M ultimately does, because they've got tons of resources, and you never
Arkansas.
know.
Don't forget Arkansas, Fayetteville.
And if Lane's still at Ole Miss, Lane's turned Ole Miss into a top 15 program. And you're right about Arkansas. A lot of people don't like hearing that because my kids go there and they think I'm a fan and stuff. But there's tons and tons of money, and people up there say it's the next Austin.
It's beautiful.
And a lot of people go, it probably is the next Austin because of the money that's pouring in. Regardless, you've got and Texas is coming into the league. Oklahoma's coming into the league. And if they have the right people in place, they're going to be dangerous. And so, yeah, if you're Auburn, sure, it's a great program, proud history, all that stuff, Bo and all that stuff, Cam Newton, and you can win a title there, no question about it, but it's really hard. And I just don't know that the people are lined up for that job the way that people think they are. And if you told me a month from now, they're like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, what are we doing? They've turned their nose up at Hugh Freeze, and Hugh Freeze. I think internally, some people there have turned their nose up at Hugh Freeze, and Hugh Freeze makes more sense than anybody on their list.
I agree. That's who I thought it would be. But, in talking about the lay of the land here in the West and just in the SEC in general, with all these schools coming in from the West, I hope your Ole Miss boosters or check writers are listening, because if Ole Miss loses Lane Kiffin, I don't know who you get that keeps Ole Miss on the map among that landscape that you just named.
Very difficult. You would have to kind of hit a home run with someone sort of out of the blue. And is that guy out there? Well, sure, there's somebody out there, but can you locate him and find him and come in?
There's not. There's not anybody else that's going to grab the attention of young people like Lane Kiffin.
No,
nobody.
You'd have to rebuild it. It'd be very, very difficult.
We're talking we're talking 10, 15. This person's not, a head coach yet. Like, this person isn't on the radar that you're trying to describe that could fill Lane Kiffin's shoes at Ole Miss.
You're absolutely
whatever it takes.
It's what I wrote that on Sunday. I wrote, hey, look, you got to sit down and say, unless you're just hell-bent on leaving, tell us what you want and at least give us an opportunity to get as close to it as we can get. And you want to keep him as long as you can keep him. Knowing there's going to come a day where somebody just offers him the moon and the sun and he has to take it. But I don't think it's Auburn. If it is, I'm shocked. But that doesn't feel right. If you told me in 3 years, it was 2 years, it's Alabama, okay, I see it.
And to the point we made earlier, Auburn's not going to let Lane be Lane. It's not going to be the same Lane there.
No, and your goal if you're Ole Miss is that you keep him, and the longer you keep him, the more the roots grow, and the more the roots grow, the more he thinks, you know what, this is okay, and the more that he thinks this is okay, the more he thinks we could do this, and you get to a 12-team playoff, and he makes it a couple of times, and once you're in a playoff, man.
Anything can happen.
It's a playoff, right? I mean, you watch the NCAA tournament. We talked about this. In a playoff setting, look, Missouri almost beat Georgia this year. If Missouri and Georgia,
Lane's a great play caller. That's the other thing. He gives you that chance, and the quarterbacks love him. They love Lane Kiffin.
Health kicks in. Maybe you play a team, they're a little beaten up. You beat them in a quarterfinal. You get to a semifinal. You get a matchup that's advantageous. And before you know it, you're playing for the whole thing. I mean, that's a playoff. We're going to see that. You saw it in the NFL all the time, right? I mean, the Bengals went to the Super Bowl last year.
Great example.
I mean, it's the Eli Manning's 2 titles were both as wild card teams. So it just, once you make the tournament, my good friend Dan Jennings with the Washington Nationals was with the Miami Marlins, Florida Marlins. They won 2 titles, once knocking my Cubs out on the way. But he used to say their whole deal was just make the tournament.
Okay, so here's my question.
Just make the tournament.
So here's the elephant in the room I want to ask you about. This is the rumor. Can the Mannings bridge with Kiffin? Is that what Ole Miss needs for the complete unification and the money and the power and the synergy that we're talking? Is that the final? Is that where we're at with trying to keep this thing together and the momentum going?
I'm embarrassed to admit that I've never even thought about it that way, because I think in my mind I've almost dismissed that possibility as realistic. I don't know what it is all about, and I don't know that it's deeply personal. But when Kiffin was being hired in those 24 to 48 hours before it got done, when there was still a chance that Ole Miss would move in a different direction, when there was still a chance that Arkansas would get in and get him, there was friction. There's no other way about it. Ole Miss doesn't like when people say this. They like to push back on it a little bit, but it doesn't change the fact that it's true. There was friction. It's not a secret. That's not who Archie Manning wanted Ole Miss to hire. I think Archie Manning wanted Ole Miss to hire Billy Napier, but Billy Napier didn't want the job. I don't know who else was in that mix. Was it Eli Drinkwitz? That's kind of come out as a real rumor that's who, Keith Carter liked. But Keith Carter listened to the people. The people wanted Lane Kiffin. By the middle of that week, they wanted Lane Kiffin. It's really weird, Mike. and I'm not giving myself credit for this because I laugh at it. The people that give me credit, I'm like, no, stop. But on Monday of that week, Ole Miss fired Matt Luke on a Sunday. On Monday of that week, when we started listing names, I talked about Lane Kiffin. I'd been talking about Lane Kiffin back in 2017 when he had just coached one season at FAU, and Ole Miss was doing the what do we do out of this interim thing. Literally the day, this was how stupid I was, Mike.
Well, and you saw the ceiling, but you saw the ceiling. Yes, it was a gamble, but we're looking for a ceiling higher at that point.
Well, because here's my analogy, but I'll finish my story because I'll tell you how dumb this is. Matt Luke's finished his interim season. This is the weekend going in. I actually thought they were going to hire Dave Doran, and then they scrambled, and they were going to hire Luke. And I wrote in my lead to my 10 weekend thoughts that Sunday, you should just hire Lane Kiffin. This is 2017. I've got to cover Matt Luke after I write, you shouldn't hire Matt Luke. You should hire Lane Kiffin. Right. To Matt's credit, he was always a pro about it. But, I always thought, my analogy is this. If you take a ladder, okay? If you're way up the ladder, well, you have a lot of room to fall. So you got to be careful because your risk is high up here. But if you're just on the first step of the ladder, or you're just standing at the foot of the ladder, well, if you fall down, you're not going to get hurt. I mean, you might scrape your knee or worst case, sprain your ankle or something, but you're not breaking anything, and you're sure not going to die. You're not going to get paralyzed. You're not going to suffer you're not going to break your spine. I mean, there's a reason that you watch little babies walk around, right? When they're toddlers and they fall and they land on their bottom and they might cry a minute, but they're not hurt. Nobody's hurt. He gets back up and toddles some more. Well, it's different. And Ole Miss was there. Ole Miss was at the very foot of the ladder. I'm not even sure they were on the first step yet. So there was nowhere to fall. So if Lane Kiffin had come in and been a flaming trash can disaster, okay. All right, well, we tried that. Try something else. Because once you're 4-8, you're 4-8. There's no difference. There's no difference between 4-8 and 3-9. There's just no difference. Once you suck, you suck. And so figure out how to not suck. And if that means taking a home run swing, okay, take it. If you miss, you struck out again. What's another strikeout? It's totally different where if you're at the top of it, like if you're Georgia today, right? And Kirby Smart walks in, and I'm not just hypothetical. Kirby Smart walks in and goes, hey, I'm sick of this grind. I'm not going to do this anymore. When this is over, this season's over, I'm letting you know I'm walking away. I'm going to go fish or hunt or play golf or whatever. Watch the kids, be a dad, whatever. Okay, well, you got notice now. If you're Georgia, you're at the top. Your list is, hey, we won't take risk here. You're not, hey, let's hire Deion Sanders. No. That's not what we're doing now.
I think they'd call Will Muschamp. I think Will's already on staff.
Yeah, well, see, they would do something that they viewed as safe. Maybe you get Dan Lanning back, whatever the case may be. You do something like that. My point is that you're not taking somebody that's kind of renegade out there. Right. You're not. Ole Miss was at a spot where it just made sense. Right. But for whatever reason, the Mannings didn't like it. You see that Arch never really considered Ole Miss. Some of that was his mom. Some of that was NIL. I get it. And he's going to make an absolute fortune at Texas. He's going to be the face of the program. At Ole Miss, I don't know that he would be the face of the program because Lane is such a big personality. And now you've got Juice Kiffin in the mix. And how do you overcome Lane and his dog? I don't know if it can ever be fixed. I guess in an ideal world, you bring all that together, but I'll be honest, I don't get the sense that Lane gives a damn about that part of it.
Well, it's not about Lane. It's about the resources is what my thing is where my mind went.
Yeah.
And the public and what the Mannings could do if they were all in behind Ole Miss right now.
Lane is so popular here with the people. They love him so much. He is such a personality fit that Mike, I don't know that they could be much more unified than they are right now. Even the people that are kind of the Manning types, everybody loves winning. And when you win, you just kind of grit your teeth and go, well, maybe it is working. So I don't know. But to answer your question, probably. But is that realistic? I don't know. No, they tried. They rolled out the red carpet when they retired Eli's number. And
that was great.
And Lane wore the Manning shirt and all that stuff. And I kind of thought that was the olive branch. And if you're not going to take it, And not that they owed their kid, because they didn't. Cooper didn't owe his son to Ole Miss. That's ridiculous. But he didn't really consider them. Now, he let them know way ahead of time so they could go recruit other quarterbacks, which I thought was the right thing to do, and he did. But it kind of feels like that chapter might be sort of closing.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
Hey, I kept you way too long.
Sorry, this has been fun, man.
You're awesome. You know my opinion on you. I think you're absolutely one of the 2 or 3 very best out there. I think the SEC Network needs to pop you in the big chair and let you handle it. You would boost ratings. You're a superstar. I appreciate you very, very much. Hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Neil, we've just been around a long time, and we dare to call it like we see it, and I think that works. Some people try to please people all the time. I think we both kind of take our shots every now and then because we don't go with conventional wisdom, or we don't judge the direction of the wind before we give our opinion. And sometimes we go against that. But if nothing else, even when people disagree, they know we're being authentic. And at the end of the day, I think that's what people truly want. Now, some people want to change the channel until they can find the news that they want delivered the way they want. But at the end of the day, I think internally, we all really want to know what the temperature is outside. And we want the weatherman that's going to tell us whether, I really didn't want to hear it was going to rain today, but it's going to rain today. And I think you've done a great job with that everywhere you've been. And that's why I've respected you as a journalist. And beyond our friendship, I watched you do it. I saw you take stands in Mobile, Alabama that I don't think people will ever appreciate or understand, but I do. And it's never changed you. So much respect to you. And I'll do your show anytime. I enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, my man. Hope to see you soon. Really do.
All right, man. Later.
Talk to you. Bye. My good friend Ryan Brown, the next round, joins on the show as he does quite frequently throughout the football season and beyond. Ryan, how are you?
Neil, I'm fantastic. You doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's been a busy week. I don't know whether I'm braced for like a super busy month of December or what I'm looking at. We'll get to that in a minute. Obviously, the focus right now is on Ole Miss and Alabama Saturday at 2:30. Alabama's an 11.5-point favorite. I've talked to so many people who think that line's too big. I initially thought it was too small, and people have talked me out of it, and they've talked me into thinking Ole Miss could cover and maybe Ole Miss could win because of Alabama's road woes. You watch Alabama every week, obviously, because you have to talk about them a lot. Are the road woes just is it a real thing, or is it something that we're just sort of picking on? Is it coincidental, or is there something that's happening with that team where they're not as good as they used to be on the road?
No, we've got a good enough sample size to now know it is a legit issue. Not just occasional. Really, if you go back the last 2 seasons, if you combine the last 2 seasons, road games, not neutral site now, not Atlanta or the college football playoff, but true road games, Alabama has only played one good one, and that was Mississippi State last year in Starkville. Outside of that, Alabama has been at times bad on the road. And this year, just as an example, at Texas, Alabama had, I think, 15 total penalties in that game. I don't have it in front of me in the first half. And had to kick a field goal. I mean, Brown had to be superhuman in the final drive. They kick a field goal with the horn to win. At Arkansas, build a big lead. Now, the one caveat on this one, I'll give Bryce Young got hurt in this game.
Sure, absolutely.
But it was, I believe, 14-0 when Young hurt. Milroe comes in, they build a big lead, and then they just kind of let off the gas now. But they ended up covering in that game. But that was a weird game. That was a weird game, no doubt about it.
That game was a play away. I've talked about this. That game was one play away from getting really weird. Alabama was up 28-23. Arkansas had scored. They kicked off late third quarter and forced a 3rd and 10, maybe even a 3rd and 15 to start the fourth quarter. And Milroe broke a big run, and from that point forward, Alabama won the game. But I've always wondered, boy, if you could change a play in that, change that to make it a sack. Like, let that crowd go nuts, and you got to punt to them. And the way that was going, maybe they score. Arkansas goes up 30-28. Maybe we're talking about a totally different deal. But it didn't happen. They won that game, and they covered, and they looked good. And I kind of thought, they're fine. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're fine. They don't have their starting quarterback, right? He'll be back at some point. And at the time, you didn't know how serious it was. But and then, at Tennessee, Alabama has 17 penalties. And look, I'm not, Alabama fans got upset at thinking, they got the raw deal, which I know the conference loves hearing Alabama fans complain about getting the raw deal. But Alabama, they got the raw deal. And frankly, Neil, there were a lot of pass interferences that you're like, I don't know if I saw that or whatever. You can't argue pre-snap penalties. I mean, we've got too many men on the field. You've got delays of game. You've got illegal procedures. You've got illegal shifts. Illegal formations, stuff like that. You just can't argue those. That's not a ref looking at something. Those are obvious penalties. They do those on the road. They don't do them at home. So 17 penalties at Tennessee and some bonehead plays and just out of sort. At LSU, it was the same thing all over again. Alabama drives all the way down the field to start the game. Offense looks unstoppable. Defense had already gotten a hold. Personal foul, by the way. Defense had gotten a hold, and I thought that was a questionable hit on the quarterback. And then Bryce Young commits a turnover, and Alabama's offense is not the same the rest of the game. And that you've seen this in the summer, these road Alabama teams come into Oxford, and it's 21-0. Stadium's all jazz. Where this is the night, we're ending Alabama's undefeated season, yada, yada, and it's 21-0 before the anthem's done. And you're like, what the crap just happened? How is Alabama already up 21-0 on us? And the game's over. They don't do that anymore. They just don't have that gene in them anymore for some reason.
I remember doing Peter Burns' show, and I think I pissed him off. It was in the morning. It was a Friday morning. Alabama was coming here during the Matt Luke era, I think. And he said, give me a scenario where Ole Miss wins the game. And I said, there's not one. And it was just my way. I wasn't trying to be. I just said there's not one. And he goes,
no.
He got irritated. So, you don't have any more optimism than that. I said, it's not my job to be optimistic. It's my job to cover the team. And you asked me for a scenario where Ole Miss wins the game, and there's not one. He said, well, give me a scenario where it's close. And I said, there's not one. And he's got so angry. But this is different, right? I mean, yeah, and that was a different – to prove your point, that was an era where Alabama felt invincible. And it was an era where Ole Miss wasn't very good. Now, Ole Miss has not lost a home game in, I don't know what it's been, 12 games, 13 games, something like that. It's been a bunch of games. Lane's been really good at home since he got to Ole Miss, and Alabama's not invincible. And so you look at it and you go, well, maybe. If I was doing his show now, and I've never been invited back on, I probably won't be. He said, give me a scenario. I think I could do it. So I'll ask you, give me a scenario where Ole Miss wins the game. What would you think you would see if I told you Ole Miss won?
I would say, so my perception of Ole Miss, let me start right here. Make sure my perception of Ole Miss from the games I've watched Ole Miss Kentucky, all of Ole Miss Auburn, and then, all of Ole Miss LSU, parts of Ole Miss here. I've watched those entire games, right? And perception of Ole Miss is anytime they play somebody with a half-competent run offense, they've been able to run the ball on Ole Miss fairly effectively. Am I all?
No, it's more than fair.
Yeah.
More than fair. And here, frankly, in the last 4 games, even including Vanderbilt, they've been pretty. They've struggled on defense. I mean, they've made some plays and gotten it done a couple of times, but it's been iffy. They've had some injuries. They've had some issues. They don't have that defensive tackle that I think you wish you had, and they've got really one quality linebacker in Troy Brown, and he's hurt, and now he's back this week, but how healthy is he? There's some questions.
Yeah.
In the secondary. They've been okay. They do some things, but that's more than fair.
Yeah, and specifically, I watched Auburn run for almost 300 yards, and Auburn a good run team. So, and I know a lot of the quarterback spot that Alabama doesn't get. But here's the thing Alabama does, perplexing, and Connor Saturday Down South pointed this stat out. Alabama is 3rd in the nation in yards per carry, 3rd in the nation, and it's just under 6. It was over 6 until I think the State game. Alabama had a weird rush game against State. 5.9 yards was really good, obviously good. It's 3rd in the nation. Yet they're 88th in rush attempts. So make that make sense for me, Neil. I mean, it just doesn't. It just doesn't make sense how you're that good per attempt. So how many times are you going to, 88th in the nation, what we're going to do.
Is that Bill O'Brien trying to be too much NFL at the college level?
I think so. Bill O'Brien's offense. So this is so perplexing because I've seen his name mentioned for like big, Nebraska or whatever other open to Wisconsin or even Auburn. I've seen people talk about him from Auburn, and Auburn fans would riot if that's their hire. But I had a respected by national college football writer reach out to me and talk to me about Bill O'Brien. I was like, Alabama fans pay to take him or pay Nebraska to take him. He's like, are you serious? They want to get rid of Bill O'Brien? He won the Heisman last year. I was like, yeah, but watch his offenses. They just don't the rhythm. And Alabama fans got spoiled because they went from Lane Kiffin to Steve Sarkisian. And see what you want about Sark as a head coach. I think Lane's a better head coach than Sark. What about a Sark as a head coach? Both those guys know how to call a football game.
For sure. They're two of the best in the business.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. They know how to call a football game. So our fans got really spoiled. And even before Lane, you have Brian Dable, who is
cannot argue with Nick Saban's ability to pick.
No.
I mean, Dable's got the Giants a playoff contender.
That's right. And let me correct myself. That was between Lane and Sarkisian and Dable. Now, he was saddled with Jalen Hurts before Jalen Hurts figured it all out. And Saban would not go below. I would love to have seen Brian Dable with Tua. There's no what Alabama's offense would have looked like with that set of receivers in Tua to Brian Dable, but to see that, and then you went to Loxley, and then you went to Sarkisian. So they had Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian bookended there, and they got really spoiled. And Bill O'Brien just is not that guy. So a long-winded answer to your question, how does Ole Miss win this thing? If Alabama doesn't commit to the run, that's where Alabama gets in trouble. When, for whatever reason, they're away from the run game, and they get in trouble doing that. And then defensively, Ole Miss loves to run the football. You can run it on Alabama a bit. But I think it would need, Jackson Dart needs to have a really good day, which you can do against Alabama secondary. Alabama secondary's committed a lot of these. And I've seen a lot of teams just third and throw it up, and Alabama's one-on-one, and they commit a penalty. You get a lot of coverage from Alabama. So when the quarterback flushes like Jaden Daniels did, everybody's got their back to the quarterback. So there's rush yards available to this Alabama defense. So I would say your path is Jackson Dart has a good, clean day, and Alabama goes away from them. They are very beatable in those situations, not to mention all the penalties. If Alabama has penalties like they've been having on the rest, will be a tight game.
At times, this has not seemed to be the most focused Alabama team in the world, and I'm curious about this because Alabama now, realistically, is playing an inconsequential game by Alabama standards. Alabama's not used to, the difference between 9 wins and 10 wins is the Sugar Bowl as opposed to the Citrus. Alabama's used to playing for the title. Realistically, they're not playing for the title. I mean, I know that they could talk themselves into it if Arkansas beats LSU, and they could say, well, hey, look, if we win and then Texas A&M beats them, that's a lot of ifs.
That's a lot of ifs, yeah.
So, for the sake of it, let's say this is inconsequential from a championship standpoint. How do you anticipate a program that's not used to that at all responding to that?
Well, we haven't seen it since 2010. I mean, that is the last time, Neil, that Alabama will have taken a snap where realistically they don't have a shot at the college football for the BCS. Think about that now. 10.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it really is. It's incredible consistency, but that was the last time Alabama was just out of it. Like there was no realistic path to the college football playoff for the BCS. And this team obviously has never had to do that. I don't know. I mean, we just have not seen out of this program. This has not proven to be the most mentally mature team. So, I mean, it does make me wonder. This team, without being in the locker room, without Nick Saban having point blank, so he has kind of danced around saying it, the strike the team whose leadership is poor. And I don't think it's a reflection on Bryce Young, but you've seen Bryce Young interviewed, Neil. He's just a soft-spoken guy. He is respected in that locker room. But I don't think Bryce Young's the type of guy that's going to take a locker room over and everybody's like, hey, let's make sure we do this right, bring our back. I think he's just a chill, laid-back California kid. Player, but really soft-spoken. And I just don't know who the is. I thought it was Will Anderson on defense. But he just hasn't, his numbers, I'm not going to say he hasn't, I don't grade the film. Numbers haven't been what everybody thought they would be. He's got 7 sacks, and I think by now people would easily have double-digit sacks. So I just don't know where the leadership is on this team.
So people always do this. I refuse to do it because I think it's stupid. But I'll act because enough people do it where I'm like, well, maybe I'm stubbornly sticking to something. people say Saban's lost a step. The dynasty's over. You can feel it slipping away, blah, blah, blah. And I'm always like, it's dumb. And I agreed. Kiffin said it on Monday, and I was like, yep, you're right. Even though Kiffin was like, hey, I'm not going there. That is goat fuel, and nope.
Yep.
But I'm Kiffin here. I'm like, come on. Yeah, it's 2 really close games. Now, they could easily be a 4-loss team. They could have lost to Texas, could have lost to Texas A&M easily. Given, Texas A&M needed to convert 1 2-point play, and they win the game. But they didn't, so they split these 4 games. So they probably are what they are, which is a 2-loss team, which is not a disaster, but I'm being long-winded now. Has he lost a step?
I don't know that Nick Saban has lost a step. I think Nick Saban is, for the way he approaches this, and now I'm going to come back with a big caveat on the back end of this, the way he approaches this, as far as demanding as he is on players and as tough as he can be to play and coach for, but primarily play for. In this era of the minute a kid gets pissed, he's in the portal. The minute a kid get the NIL money he thought he was going to get at Alabama because Bryce Young got $2.5–3 million. He's having to deal with players, and you talk with former players who say the same thing you say. Like, it's insane to talk about him losing a step. However, the Nick Saban I played for, I've heard so many of his former players say that this is a different guy. You still see him get fiery on the sidelines, but the way he kind of publicly coddles a team, he never did that for us, So I do think he's a bit differently. Now, here's the big caveat. Kirby Smart's a younger version of the same guy, and it's working for Kirby. Former Alabama receiver Mike McCoy is doing a deal with AL.com now where he breaks the game down and gives his opinion. And, his hot take was, it's all NIL. He's got a card for NIL. Georgia's guys do. They're making money, and I watched that Tennessee game. Those guys play hell off. And speaking of Tennessee, those guys are playing hard. So you're telling me it's only NIL at Alabama? I don't buy into that. Everybody's dealing with that, Neil.
We all get softer as we get older. Most of us. I know I have. Y'all joked about me on your show on Wednesday about how I used to be. What did you say?
Dunaway said hard is hard. I think inmate hard, like prison hard. I called you Prison Mike from The Office. Yeah,
I never knew I came across that way, but I guess maybe I did. I'm certainly not that way.
This is Dunaway we're talking about. That you got to understand that. Yeah,
I've gotten softer as I got older. There's no question, and so it's possible. Nick Saban, who's a grandfather now, right? It's possible that he, that he's just kind of. He's won everything. There's nothing more to win. There's nothing. All he can do is just add layers to his legacy. But he could lose 55-0 tomorrow, Saturday. Lose to who they play, Austin Peay. Lose to Auburn, and then go lose in the Las Vegas Bowl, and then announce his retirement, and nobody would ever talk about the end. They would talk about,
oh no,
he's the GOAT. He's the guy. So maybe it's just, when you run out of things to play for, I don't know.
Well, no, I do think there have been two. If you talk to people close to Nick Saban, you never get this out of Nick Saban. He might give you an answer, but I don't know that it would be, actual. I don't know. I don't know that it'd be the answer you want. But if you talk to people close to him, there have been 2 transformative things in his personal life. Maybe not, but there have been 2 big public ones in his time in Tuscaloosa. The first one, 2011 tornadoes, horrible day in this state, man. Hundreds of people died, and a lot of Tuscaloosa and campus was affected. The city was, just devastated, right? And that had a profound effect on Saban. And he saw these coaches, it, Neil, they are the worst in the world getting in this tunnel and you don't even know the outside's going on, but you could avoid that one. And that had a huge impact on Nick Saban. And he and his wife were extremely generous in that time and helped rebuild homes, and their charity donated homes. And I think what that trend that made Nick Saban, he'd only been the coach at Alabama since 2007. So he'd been there 7, 8, 9, 10, and have the 11th season. And I think that made him, ingrained him in the community, right? A guy that everybody's talking about, Nick Saban's going to leave, he's going to coach. But I think he developed roots in that community in that time. And the other one you mentioned, it was being a grandfather. When he became a grandfather, I'm not going to say it softened him, but I think when I became a father, and you're the same way, you and I have talked about this, it changes your view, your world view, right? Yeah, every those kids, man. I gotta provide for those kids and take care of them. And I imagine, and I've heard this, when you become a grandfather, it's like that times and maybe. So those are two transformative things that maybe just changed his outlook and maybe softened him a bit. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that has happened.
Before we move on to the other topic I want to discuss with you, do you have a kind of a thought on who wins this game?
Go ahead and finish your sentence because
I'm not even sure. I was going to say you normally are pretty bullish on Alabama. God, you should be. They've won 99% of the games that you watch when they play, and so I would be too if I were in that shoes. And I'm still catching myself inclined to do the Bama Respect Week and go, they're just going to win because that's what they do. And yet, I don't know. There's something that feels funny about it.
I agree. I'm done thinking Alabama team's going to wake up on the road. Week after week, I've been like, okay, it's happened twice now. It's not going to happen three. It just keeps happening to Alabama on the road. So I'm not going to believe in road Alabama anymore. Normally, I would have told you, look, the great story with Ole Miss, great job by Lane Kiffin. It comes to an end now. I still think we'll win this game, but I think it's going to be a tight, hard-fought win. The caveat, and I brought this up to you when you were on with us Wednesday, and I don't know what would happen in this situation, but let's assume a second Arkansas beats LSU. Now, this game is everything for Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. I know what the crowd will do. I wonder what Ole Miss, right? I wonder how they would handle that.
I don't know. They all openly admitted that they were disappointed that Alabama lost to LSU. They were hoping Alabama would win the game. So I think based on that, they would view it as, well, son of a bitch, we just got our gift back. It's as if they did it, so we control our own destiny. Let's go, I think. But, man, you never know. Like, you go into a game and you think, hey, Arkansas just lost to Liberty and looked like crap doing it. And LSU beat Alabama, and they beat us, and we know what they did to us. And LSU's winning that game, which is, by the way, what I think. I think LSU's winning, and I think they're winning fairly easily. But, you're down there warming up, and you start hearing a buzz in the crowd, and someone says it gets out because it's going to get out, obviously. Arkansas 31, LSU 28, final.
Yeah.
When you walk back into that tunnel one last time to get ready or whatever, or it's at 2:20 when the game ends in Fayetteville, and then maybe they're even showing it on the Jumbotron or something, and you're watching the Arkansas people celebrating or whatever, and you're like, oh, my God, this just changed. Who knows? I don't know. I don't think it's going to come to that, though. I don't.
No.
I think LSU's going to win that game. I mean, it's going to be cold and all that stuff in Fayetteville, but it's not wet. If you told me it was wet, I'd be like, oh, maybe, because they tend to play really well in that environment when that happens. But I think LSU wins.
I'm kind of with you. So I say that would obviously be a factor to this whole thing. Funny you said 31-28. That's kind of the score I was thinking about for this game. I think Alabama will win. I think it's going to be a tight game. Wouldn't me if Ole Miss is even late into the quarter and it comes down to another Bryce Young drive. That's the one consistent thing with Young. Every single time needed him to drive the field. He did it against Texas for the win. He did it against Tennessee. Even though they missed the field goal, he got Alabama in field goal range. Closer field goal. He had one dropped. He did it against LSU to force overtime, scored again in overtime. They kicked LSU goes for two. So time Young's been called on that situation, like, hey, gotta have you, man. Game on the line. He has answered every single time.
Yeah, he's a damn magician. He's amazing.
No, he is.
He's a terrific college football player. All right, you mentioned Lane Kiffin. I'm not going to keep you much longer, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about this. I know you got about 5 or 6 minutes before you got to go.
Yeah.
Lane Kiffin to Auburn. Everybody's talking about it. Jay Tate and I do G-Pits every week, and Jay firmly believes that Auburn is focused on Lane Kiffin, that they're going to probably offer the job to Lane Kiffin. Doesn't know that Lane will take it or not take it. You're there in that state. You hear things. Are we just assuming that that's who they want, or are you hearing this from credible people too? That hey, that's Auburn's pretty focused on Lane Kiffin.
Well, I think that there are two leading names among Auburn brass, and both of them oddly have deep Ole Miss ties. It is Hugh Freeze and Lane Kiffin, and I don't think it's any accident that it's those two guys. And in one case, the kind of up and coming offensive guys, weird to call Lane Kiffin. He's been a head coach forever, 2009 at Tennessee. But the guy that's got, he's got a lot of gravitas, and people are excited about the way he calls offense, and he's not going to go after Nick Saban. And I think a lot of people like that. And then there's Hugh Freeze, who actually beat Nick Saban twice in a row, and I think that gets people's attention, right? That offense that gave Alabama trouble every time Alabama played Ole Miss and wins. The Hugh Freeze offense gave them trouble, and to a certain extent, Ole Miss has as well. Now, the get your popcorn ready didn't quite go that way, but anyway. All that said, I think two choices, and Hugh Freeze feels like a little bit of a safer choice. The aspect of Lane there's a lot of extra mustard with Lane. Ole Miss fans know that.
Yeah.
And that's just not an type thing. You're going to have to say, all right, we're going to accept the guy doing stuff differently than he's ever done it here, than any coach has ever done it here. Hugh Freeze, that guy. Hugh Freeze is more from the Pat Dye, Tommy Tuberville mold of the way he approaches the game. But I don't have to tell your audience what the baggage is for Hugh Freeze. And there are a lot of people at Auburn that can't get past that. And it remains to be seen if two people are new athletic director Cohen from Mississippi State, now at Auburn, and the school president, Chris Roberts. If those two can't get past, it's going to be hard to hire Hugh Freeze. So then you've got Lane Kiffin, who I do think is the popular choice. I think, there are going to be a lot of people that Lane and Jimmy Sexton are playing Auburn. They're just trying to get Ole Miss whatever it is they want out of Ole Miss. And if Lane beats Alabama Saturday, and if the Auburn job, he's never had more leverage in his entire life at that point.
Yeah, and I think Ole Miss, Ole Miss is going to give him literally every penny that is available to give.
Yeah, and there's this school of thought. Let me tell you what, and I know the people that are better than this, but there's a lot of fans that think this whole 4-year contract limitation means, well, God, we can just outbid them. They don't understand how that's only the state port lanes getting paid privately through the athletic channels, the athletic booster, whatever, athletic fund. I don't know what they call it at Ole Miss. He's getting paid more than that, and that's where his buyout
Loyalty Foundation.
Yeah, okay, there you go. And what a fan never really said is they look at how much you're getting paid per year. The true, and you know this, Neil, the true value in any coach is the buyout. It's not what you have to pay me to show up at work every day. It's what you have to pay me to stop showing up every day. That's the value in any coach's contracts. If Auburn wants to guarantee Lane, I mean, what's he make, 7.5 right now at Ole Miss?
He's making 7.5. They're going to get him to 10. You're on to this, and I said this on your show Wednesday. And I've had people tell me, the reason I've kind of come up with this is people say, if I told you Lane Kiffin's the coach at Auburn, what does that tell you? And I think they're wanting me to tell them, well, Ole Miss will hire X. And I always say, it tells me that Auburn guaranteed $100 million.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's 100% fair. I mean, I look at, if I'm Lane Kiffin, my sales job, or Jimmy Sexton, is look what Texas A&M is paying Jim Fisher. And if anybody's smart, they're paying them that because of you, Jimmy. And he would say, well, I know. But
Jimmy doing his job.
My guy's better. I mean, Lane Kiffin's better. I think any job in America, if you said you can have Jimbo Fisher and Kiffin, 100% of them go Lane Kiffin right now.
Yes.
Why would you not?
Of course.
So if Jimbo's getting that at A&M, if I'm Jimmy Sexton, I'm like, my guy did that or more. And if Kirby's getting what he's getting, he's won, a national championship, played for another one in Saban. So those guys are kind of in a different stratosphere. But I look at that and I say, hey, that's obviously the cost of doing business. Look what Nick's making, look what Kirby's making, look what Jimbo's making. My guy is at that level. So I'm with you. I think that's what the deal would look like.
Last thing, I'm going to throw this one last hypothetical at you. Let's say, for kicks and giggles, that Lane Kiffin stays at Ole Miss. Say, let's do conservative. Let's say he wins 10 games this year, goes to a bowl game, whatever. Let's say that next season he does the same thing, 10 wins. Mm-hmm. 10 wins at Ole Miss 3 years in a row is high cotton. Nobody's ever done it.
Pretty good.
Stays another year, keeps winning. Nick Saban, 73. Nick Saban finally says, okay, you know what? I do enjoy this grandfather thing. I'm ready. The game's changed. I'm ready. It's time. I know today Lane Kiffin is not the guy at Alabama if Nick walked away now. Could you see a scenario in 2 years where he would be?
The scenario you just laid out is far more beneficial to him being that guy. You're right. Today there's not a chance.
Right.
Not a chance. But if he continues to have that type of success, the and hurt feelings of the people in Tuscaloosa, and without going to do it, I would just tell you, Neil, that I don't think Lane left behind a lot of good feelings, Tuscaloosa. And I think a lot of that gets healed if you were like, yeah, but look what he's doing at Ole Miss. You know, could we give him?
He's changed a lot since then.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I think as time goes on, some of that will get healed. And in the scenario you played out, yeah, I think Lane's considered. If it were today, he wouldn't. But I think in the scenario, if Lane continues to show signs of personal maturity, and if he continues to produce on the field at Ole Miss that way, it is a play. And I know what you're getting at. If that is Lane's ultimate goal, don't know if it is or isn't, Auburn ends that forever.
I know.
And I think that's an aspect of the Auburn deal. If Lane thinks he's on the next short list, you don't go over. You can't. You cannot do that if that's what you want to do.
I agree. I think it's a factor. I don't know that it's a big enough factor to stop if they put 10 years, $115 million on the table. I mean, what do you got to say yes, probably, but it's got to be on your mind that because there's no doubt, Ryan, no doubt. I mean, he hasn't told me this because Lane doesn't tell people stuff, but there's no doubt that Lane Kiffin would prefer to, if you offered him, hey, you can be the head coach at Alabama or the head coach at Auburn. He's at Alabama. No doubt.
Yeah, I mean, the way going right now, I don't know why. And these guys are going to be like, I got to follow Saban. These guys have egos. They think pick it up and keep going.
Of course.
I would say this, and I can't remember if I said it on your show or not. My prediction, my official prediction for Nick Saban's replacement, even before he coached his first game this year, was Dan Lanning.
I know. I said it here, and I paid attention to it, and I think you're right because Auburn talked about Dan Lanning. I'm like, Dan Lanning's not leaving Oregon for Auburn. Dan Lanning, he's waiting for – because Dan Lanning would be on the very short list at Alabama, and he'd be on the very short list at Georgia. If Kirby said, you know what, I don't want to do this until I'm 60. There's no reason to. I don't want to. I'm good. And hey, a lot of people who know Kirby Smart do not believe he is going to be a lifer.
No, he's making too much money. I mean, this guy's making $10 million. You coach that 5 more years. Your kids don't have to do a whole lot of work.
Your kids don't have to work. You can go play golf. You can chase your wife around and go be an analyst to make a couple mil and, walk in park. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody who knows him, and I don't claim to, but I know people who do, and they all say the same thing. He won't coach into his 70s the way that Nick has. So
I believe that. I do believe that about Kirby.
Hey, as always, thanks so much for your time. You're always generous with it. We really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we hope to talk to you soon.
You too, Neil. Going to be a fun game. Look forward to it, man. Thanks a lot.
Parker Fleming joins now. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, Parker. I was telling you right before we got started, I look at your stuff every single week. It's like one of the highlights of the middle of my week. I can't wait to talk to you about it. First, you guys should follow Parker. It's at StatsOWar, StatsOWar on Twitter. He's a great Twitter follow. If you are interested in TCU or even if you just like football, the Purple Theory podcast is up, and then his YouTube show, Bet US College Football. You can check that out on YouTube. All great stuff. Thanks for joining me. I know you're busy, and I appreciate you taking some time.
No, absolutely, man. I'm glad to be here and glad to talk. And I know we've chatted a bunch. I'm glad to finally get on air here. This is great. Yeah.
So I have so many questions about it because I look at it every single week. I start week 1 and I just kind of follow it. I have a competition with Tyler Siskey. He and I, former Alabama assistant, Ole Miss assistant, South Alabama assistant. He and I have a show, McCready and Siskey. We have this competition, and we pick 5 NFL games and basically 6 college games every week. And the loser, we're both going to Boise for the famous Potato Bowl or whatever it's called. And the loser can't wear a hoodie or a jacket and has to wear a shirt that says potatoes have feelings too or whatever. And, basically we're just going to harass each other. So I want to win, but no big deal. It's fine. If I lose, I'm not dying or anything. But I want to win, and your predictions, not predictions, your breakdowns are one of my tools that I use. Because one of my deals is I can't pick any SEC games. I have to go totally outside the SEC. Well, I cover the SEC, and so I'm like studying Sun Belt and Pac-12 and Big 12, and I use your analytics. So I'm curious, give me a little bit about your background. How did you come into doing that, and then what all goes into those things?
Yeah, well, first I'll say, man, that's awesome. That's exactly what I made these for. Is I wanted to have like a one sheet where I could just know what to know about a game and look at it. And so I'm so glad that other people can use it. And hopefully it'll work out. You don't have to. You get to wear a jacket on the sidelines. Yeah. So I was a liberal arts undergrad. I went to TCU, studied religion with an economics minor, and have always been interested in college football, and really just kind of got interested in economics and the numbers and math kind of things a little bit too late in my undergrad career to do that. So I went back to went to grad school and got a master's in economics. And it was a bunch of math, just took a bunch of math, and I was really bored by it. And so started using, college football as a procrastination tool. Obviously, talking to and following Bill Conley, Brian Freemal, Aaron Schatz at Football Outsiders, some of those guys. And even like, the Ken Palm website, I've always really loved that. And so just have tried to, as I've kind of procrastinated and gotten to know a little bit more of the statistical software and play around with this college football data, I've just always wanted to ask and answer interesting questions about college football, and started, kind of covering TCU specifically and writing and podcasting about them. And then, of course, you think, well, how good are they? Well, let's compare them to their opponents. Well, how good are their opponents? We've got to compare them. And you go down the line and you're like, well, I need a way to figure out how to rank all these 130 teams and how to better interpret what's going on in the field, because the final score is sometimes very misleading about kind of what actually happened. And so that's all I really do right now, is just try and create tools, graphs, charts, references that help us understand what to look for in a matchup, what to look for to compare the relative strength of two teams, and to help us better understand how teams performed in a game and what was lucky, what was sustainable, back and forth. And that's turned into, I have a little website, cfb-graphs.com, where I've got some leaderboards. I've got some, I talk about games on my Bet US show and the podcast and everything. And so it's kind of ramped up from there, but mostly just I'm interested in how can numbers help us understand what happened on the field.
Do you find that as the season goes on, the numbers become more accurate? And when I say that, I'm talking about like the win probability, the projected points. Do you find that becomes more reliable as the year goes on?
I use preseason priors, right? I have a little model that says, hey, based on where you were last year, your returning production, your coach continuity, and some randomness with your schedule, how much do I expect you to improve year over year? And I hold on to those pretty decently early on because I think they're a good signal. But very quickly, teams will tell you who they are. And I try to phase those out relatively quickly. And the way I've kind of tested and trained that is to maximize, win probability and information. But I'm probably a little more aggressive on that. By about week 6, I'm 95, 96% in season data, not using preseason priors. And so my win probability is relatively constant. I assume it's one thing to factor in is like injury news gets you a little worse in the later half and some nonsense. And so that I think probably makes it go down towards the end of the season, just because that's variance you can't account for.
Sure.
But generally I try to balance the preseason projections with the in-season data to kind of make that constant over halves of the season. And, I'll do a bunch of back testing. I'll split week 6 and then post week 6 and, project the data, see what the difference is and all that. So do a bunch of testing on that, but generally try to keep it constant, although there's some variance you just can't control for down the stretch.
So when the lines came out this week, there's a couple of games here that obviously are of tremendous interest this weekend, right? You've got LSU at Arkansas, where Ole Miss fans normally hate Arkansas, and this week they're all cheering for Arkansas. Next week they'll be cheering against Arkansas, but this week Arkansas is their buddy because they need someone to beat LSU. And obviously the Ole Miss entertains Alabama Saturday afternoon, so everyone's going to be watching the 11 o'clock game in Fayetteville, hoping that the home team wins, which would let Ole Miss control its own destiny. So when the lines came out, one of the lines that really caught my attention was LSU -3 at Arkansas, because I was like, what? 3? They're going to kill Arkansas. And so I pulled up your stats, I think on Tuesday morning maybe is when I saw them for the first time. And you've got your computer analysis has LSU with a 55.67% win probability, which means Arkansas obviously 44.33. You've got LSU at 35.04 projected points, Arkansas at 33.07 projected points. And so I went, well, son of a bitch, Vegas isn't that far off in terms of what we maybe realistically expect here. And yet, having just saw LSU in person not long ago, and full disclosure, both of my daughters go to Arkansas, so I keep an eye on the Hogs a little bit so that we can talk about stuff, and the girls go to the games occasionally and all that. I thought that makes no sense. I still am just my brain goes, my eyes look at it and go, take LSU and lay the points, and you're going to be good. And yet both your computers and Vegas tell me not so fast. So what is it that I'm missing when you look into these numbers? What sticks out to you that goes, well, here's what you should be looking for?
Yeah. Three things I think are very important here. One, I don't know about KJ Jefferson's status. So this is, of course, pending, weather. And the reason I say these aren't picks is because, weather and injuries and acts of God, and who knows what's going to happen, who's hungover the morning of the game or whatever. Yeah. So can't project that.
Know whether KJ's shoulder is 92% or 71%.
Yep. Right. And I do units, and I'll explain those here as an example with this preview, but I don't do individual player stats to account for it. So it's not like, oh, the quarterback's out, knock him 6 points like your traditional Vegas guys would do. I do aggregate team level stats. Second, I think home field advantage, I'm actually getting a little more aggressive on. I used to be agnostic on, and now I don't do it. A lot of places will do like plus 2.5 points or whatever. And I don't add a point total. I do a percentage performance increase based on home field and away. And so that gives Arkansas a little bit more credit, I think, because they're at home. And if you assume KJ Jefferson's full strength, then the kind of key interesting feature in this model is that running and passing are different. Obviously, running and passing on early downs, first and second downs versus third and fourth downs are different in terms of what's good for our predictive value. What's kind of, ideally the best way to compare teams is how well they do on first and second downs, open field, no situational tendencies, right? Can't always do that, so you've got to account for it. So my model factors in a rush rate over expected, which says down distance yard line, how much more do you rush against the average team or than the average team would in that situation? Arkansas is 122nd, with lower being more rushing. They're rushing 11.6 percentage points more than the average team given any situation. And they're 44th in EPA per rush. They're 23rd in offensive rushing success rate. And so they're doing it a lot, and they're very good at it. My model's going to reward that. LSU's defense is 87th in EPA per rush allowed, 76th in rushing success rate allowed. So what my model sees here is that LSU is going to be able to score on Arkansas's defense, but Arkansas's unique mix of run pass really lets them exploit the weaker side of LSU's defense, which in turn, Arkansas's EPA per pass is 10th, because obviously Kendall Briles is really selective about when to go for the big play. And they're going to be very selective. The increased rushing there is going to help them have the probability of breaking that big play. That's what this model sees in terms of kind of the on-field matchup that would lead us to think, hey, Arkansas could keep this close if they were at full strength.
It's absolutely fascinating. All right, so I want to get into the Ole Miss game. Obviously, Alabama comes to Ole Miss. Alabama's a 11.5 point favorite. They're playing another thing that you can't plug into your computers because obviously – we don't know how Alabama's going to respond to playing in an inconsequential game for the first time in a long time. And in a scenario where it gets announced, hey, LSU 34, let's say your score's right, LSU 34, Arkansas 32 or 31, whatever that was. I pulled up the Ole Miss one, so I don't have it up. If that happens, Alabama knows, hey, we're not going to Atlanta. We're not in the BCS. We're not playing for the national title. In that moment, it's finite. It's done. Official. How do they respond to that? Hell, I don't know. I mean, no one knows. With Nick Saban's team, it's the first time in 10 years that a Nick Saban team, can you imagine that? The first time in 10 years that a Nick Saban team won't be playing in a consequential regular season games. Unbelievable. So who knows how they'll respond to that? But you've got Alabama with a 71.13% chance to win, Ole Miss at 28.87%. And then you've got the score. You've got Ole Miss covering, if people are looking at this from a betting perspective. Alabama at 30.38 points, Ole Miss at 22.69. So Ole Miss losing by about 7.5 points or so. Looking at those numbers, where are the areas that if you're an Ole Miss fan, you've got to overperform over the computer model?
Yeah, so I will say just a quick plug on the BetUS show. I picked Ole Miss plus 11.5 as one of my best bets for this week. I think they'll keep it close. Alabama, awful on the road, just awful. And so that certainly works in their favor. I think this offense is really, really good, and it's really, really deep. Obviously, I'm familiar with Zach Evans from TCU and Judkins alongside him. Like, those are just two excellent running backs. They use them, they lean on them a lot. 125th in rush rate over expected for Ole Miss, and they're 9th in EPA per rush. So that's about as good of a combination of rushing efficiency and volume that you're going to see. Alabama's defense slightly worse against the rush. They're 31st in EPA per rush allowed compared to 24 in EPA per pass. The other thing I think is really important, Alabama's done really well on 3rd and 4th downs on defense, kind of shutting people down. That's where, for instance, Will Anderson becomes an extreme liability for opposing offenses. Because if it's 3rd and 8, he's pinning his earbacks, he's going to come and get you.
Yeah. Ole
Miss is 29th on early downs EPA. They're staying ahead of the chains. They're explosive early. They're avoiding those 3rd and longs where Will Anderson would be at his most potent. And then they're 13th on 3rd and 4th down success on offense. So I think that largely Ole Miss can make a lot of hay here just by staying out of 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 obvious passing situations. Lean on your running backs, which you do at a high volume, high efficiency, and play against Alabama's strengths there by not letting Will Anderson kind of be this game-changing pressure linebacker, make him play a more traditional linebacker role. On the other side of things, I certainly think Alabama will score. The big issue for me is Ole Miss. We saw this starting with Davis Brin in that game. Ole Miss's secondary will let guys beat them. That'll just happen now and then. And they're going to really have to try and minimize the damage. They're 96th in EPA per pass allowed. And they're 92nd in passing success rate allowed. They've got to put a ceiling on that and say, hey, we're not going to give Bryce Young these explosive points. We're going to make him earn these efficiency points by continuing to move the ball successfully down the field. Alabama's offense is 27th in EPA per play, but they're 29th in success rate. So slightly less efficient than they are explosive. Ole Miss has got to say no big play touchdowns. We've got to put the lid on this. We've got to test this offensive line, test these receivers, and not get beat by chasing Bryce Young out of the pocket and letting him hit somebody deep. That's my biggest worry for Ole Miss, is the secondary and how their defense has just been so happy to let people pass against them. But I think that they should be able to do that. And with the offense, I think they should be able to slow things down, give their defense a breath, and keep this game within double digits.
You are spending a lot of time watching TCU. They're having a special season. It feels like they're flirting with disaster a time or two, but they keep winning, and that's what great teams do. They find ways to win. They get Texas this week in a game that everyone's pointing at and going, hey, Cinderella's going to break the slipper here. When you look at it, what do you see with Texas TCU?
I have these as almost identical teams. TCU at 15th in opponent-adjusted EPA per play margin, and Texas at 16th. I think Texas has been the victim of some sequencing in their losses, and obviously not having Quinn Ewers all season, definitely, in and out of quarterbacks, although I think Hudson Card is fine, and they have ridiculous weapons around them. I have this slightly favored towards Texas at home, 33-30, with Texas with a 58% win probability. That hurts my heart, but I absolutely understand it. Texas's defense, 90th in EPA per pass. TCU's offense is 11th in EPA per pass. So TCU should be able to score points, but TCU's defense has really, really struggled, especially at the linebacker position in pass coverage. They've got two guys, Jamoy Hodge, Johnny Hodges. Johnny Hodges looks like Bill Romanowski, like thick, just typical linebacker from the 1990s, not as great in pass coverage. And so I think that's really exploitable. And with a mind like Sark on the other side of the field, being able to kind of cross those over. Brennan Marion, the receivers coach, does a bunch of crazy stuff with two backs out of the backfield that I think Texas is incorporating. And that's going to be scary because Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson are two really, really great NFL quality running backs. And icing on the cake for me in the first half is that D Winters, TCU's best linebacker and kind of their in-between guy in this 3-3-5 defense, he got flagged for a dumb targeting call. Textbook. He hit the guy up high. It was a defenseless receiver, just a silly hit. And he's out for the first half against Texas. So I think that Texas will try to run it up pretty early and be able to, especially passing against this linebacking core. They have blown leads in the second half, though. So I'm worried about their kind of what they'll be able to do sustain. Obviously, TCU's come back very well and they've settled in and made good adjustments. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how they do with the narrative in the beginning. One thing that I have circled that's going to be kind of worrisome in terms of points per quality possession. So how well do you finish quality drives? Texas is 28th, averaging 4.61 points per quality drive on offense. TCU's defense is 84th, 4.28. They are giving up explosive touchdowns. They are letting you score once you cross the 40. That could be the difference in the game. You saw the Kansas State game. They kicked a couple field goals last week against Texas, and they just couldn't come back from it. I'm worried that's what we'll see, a similar narrative here for the TCU-Texas game.
You mentioned you like Ole Miss plus the points. What are some other games that you really like this week? And I'm going to write these down.
Yes. Let me. So one, we'll plug, go watch the BetUS show. We talk about a bunch of games there and I give some picks. Other games that I like this week, and especially in Power 5, I'm rolling with Florida State minus 7.5 versus Syracuse. I think Syracuse is kind of spiraling the wrong direction.
I do too.
And they're a little bit fake. Florida State last year, their offensive and defensive metrics were way better than their record. They just had some sequencing issues, some negative big plays, some special team stuff. They've ironed that out. The offensive line looks a lot better. So I like them. I like Washington State against Arizona State at home, 7.5 points as well. And the other one I'm riding really hard this weekend is Washington at Oregon. I think Washington is a worse version of UCLA, and we saw how that went. Washington has a pretty good offense, but that defense is not very good. And I think if Michael Penix, as much as I love seeing him be free, right? He was under so much pressure, literally and figuratively, at Indiana. And I think he's a fine quarterback. Love seeing him in an offense where he can thrive. But if he gets uncomfortable, he is mistake prone. So I think Oregon's going for style points here, knowing the playoff rankings and the situation as well. So I like that Oregon bet as well.
Yeah, Oregon's one that I had circled. I love that line. I liked it. It's kind of my, I hate for Tyler to hear this because now he'll get a little idea into my process. But part of my process is to go find games that I like first and not get swayed by your thing. And then I go look at yours. And so I did that the other day, and there it was, Oregon 86.21% chance to win. And you've got your computers have them winning by about 15 points, and the line's 13.5. And I have noticed, and tell me if I'm wrong, please, I have found that I think your computers are a little bit conservative as it pertains to margins of victory. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, if his computers have it at 15, that means it might be more like 18 or 19. And so I liked that pick. That's sort of one of my processes when I'm picking games.
Yeah. And that's beautiful. That's what I do literally for my to pick which games I'm going to pick for the BetUS show on Sunday night, Monday morning. I sit down with a pen and paper and go through the lines and say, do I like this? Do I not like this? Do I like it? And eliminate games. Then I go to the numbers. I think that's a great way to use them as well. And yeah, so I don't do any special teams. I throw out special teams entirely. I use a little bit of a tighter distribution. So like games that are, complete blowouts of like 58 points or something great, like Michigan beats UConn 58-3. It doesn't help me to keep that at 58-3. So I usually cap that at like a 30-point spread anyway.
Oh,
just to
that's
say,
interesting.
Generally, those outliers are not helping my predictive performance. So totally fair to say, hey, I think this, get away from them. This might be a little more volatile than the model's allowing for.
Oh, that's really fascinating. That explains a lot of the numbers too. That's really interesting. Yeah, how do you in your mind going into like next season, do you already have some tweaks in mind into the formula from results that you've seen, or do you think you're getting close to having it down?
Yeah, so I do think that I'm getting close to priced in. A lot of my stuff uses expected points added, and I've been, I try to be as stupid as possible. And I think that there's some low hanging fruit that Vegas is catching on to. So I'll definitely tweak and play around with. But again, my biggest trade-off is intelligibility, interpretability versus accuracy. So yeah, man, I can build like a machine learning neural network that takes 58 variables and is precise within 0.0001% of the spread or whatever. But I can't tell you what changes if a team runs a little more or runs a little less. And that doesn't help me understand the thing on field. So I certainly try to keep it something that I can interpret and explain. I think a model's only as good as you can explain it. I can't necessarily announce this yet, but I do have some big things in the work about data quality. Right now I'm using public data that there is a lot of errors, and I'm shifting over to a data supplier. So my actual on-field data will be 100% correct as opposed to, 60 to 70% correct right now. And I'll get some more granularity, which helps me tweak some things like, hey, I don't account for QB scrambles well right now because every QB scramble is not labeled as that. Sometimes it's a run, sometimes it's a scramble. That'll help me understand run pass splits a little bit better. So things like that this offseason, absolutely always trying to improve, hold my model with an open hand. If it starts going south, let's keep thinking, let's keep keep moving, but want to have something explainable that's generally a pretty good expectation.
Did you ever imagine that it would take off like this? That you'd become kind of people talking about you and using you as a reference, and where you're probably making a living and about to make a pretty good living doing this because so many people gamble on college football.
Yeah. So BetUS has been very generous. They pay me very well. And with the, I have a little tip jar, a buy me coffee. People respect that pretty well. And so I appreciate that certainly. And no, man, I mean, this really kind of was born out of the pandemic for the most part of just like, hey, I just have a bunch of time. Let me just work on stuff. And I mean, last fall, going into the 2021 season, in September, someone tweeted about this. They like scraped data and tweeted about Twitter growth. Is the only reason I know this offhand. I'm not a sociopath. I have like 4,000 followers. And I'm up over 20,000 now. So that, I mean, just some pretty great growth, and really respect people for sharing and appreciate that, and hope that I can just continue to make cool tools that answer questions that I'm interested in and that other people find them interesting.
It'll be on the screen, but for those of you who are listening in podcast form, again, it's Stats O War. When you pull it up, it says Parker. You should absolutely follow Parker for his computer models, his thoughts on football. If you're a TCU fan, it's an absolute must as well. But even if you don't care anything about the Big 12 or TCU or whatever, you just like college football, Parker's a must follow. I can't tell you how much I enjoy following your account. I'm gonna start watching your show now. I was unaware of the show. See, I learned something myself doing this. So I'll start watching the show, get some tips here and there on some games, and really I've looked forward to this. It exceeded my expectations. I appreciate you very much, Parker. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, man, Neil, and I love your stuff too. And I think I said this off air. I have a couple of friends who are Ole Miss grads who, always send me your stuff and say like, oh, he mentioned your stuff. And so that's really cool. And I love that, man. I'm happy to come on anytime. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Enjoy your weekend. Hope good luck to the Horned Frogs. I worry about them this weekend, but if they pull this one off, man, who knows, right? I mean, they might take this thing all the way.
Yeah, it's gonna be stressful, but we'll see what happens.
At least you're there, right? It's better than being 5-4 and playing for the Texas Bowl or something.
I haven't felt this kind of nervous in 5 or 6 years about TCU football, so this is certainly a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Again, thanks so much. Enjoy your weekend. Talk to you soon. Our guy, Ben Mintz, with his fresh haircut, joins from Hoboken, New Jersey today. That's where he is. Normally he's in New York. Sometimes he's in New Orleans. He's heading back to New Orleans here soon, but he's in Hoboken today, looking fly with his Barstool hoodie and his new haircut. Look at you, man. If you told me you're going to be looking all good, I'd have gone and gotten a fresh haircut myself, and I'd match.
Well, I had a big trip last weekend where I went to LeBare's Lake Charles, which is my favorite Penn property I think we have. And it's such a nice property that they got a barber shop in there. And so, who am I to not go in there and take advantage of all the amenities we got? So I hit them up for a haircut and a shave, and, I'm trying to look a little better. And I made a trip out of it, went to that awful Monday night game. God bless. That was a rough effort from New Orleans.
Yeah, for sure.
And got back up here, but doing good, getting excited. You mentioned the New Orleans thing. I know I talked about it on here last week, but when I leave for the Christmas holidays, I'm not coming back, and pretty excited about it. I feel like I gave it it was almost like a 2-year business trip up here, you could actually say. I really gave it 2 years to earn the opportunity I have now, and just so excited about the next 3 years. And I'll be able to be around Oxford a lot more for big stuff too, being NOLA. So it's
you can't say this, but I will. 2 years in New York would be literally all I could possibly stand.
Well, it was about it. I love Barstool, and I actually like Hoboken. Hoboken's great. But the New York thing, look, if you're not making $250,000 a year, which I'm not, even if whatever people think this job is, you're barely getting by. Like, you don't understand. The rent and the price of living up here is so much. Like, yeah, if I was making $500,000, it'd be awesome to live in New York. But if you're not, it's tough. So, I'm excited. I got the new 3-year deal. I got a raise, and I'm going somewhere where the money can go a lot farther. And, I'm almost 40. I got to start saving some money. So it's all positive.
You got to help me make some money here today. Let's see.
I got some strong opinions this week. This board, there's a lot of stuff going on with this gambling board. I spent a bunch of time on it already.
All right. I'm interested to hear it. Well, I'm just going to start with some SEC games. Feel free to tell me when something else comes up. Missouri at Tennessee, the line's 20. Tennessee coming off that loss, but they're very much in the playoff picture. They just got to win and got to win big now.
Yeah, so it's really fascinating that Tennessee got spanked by Georgia, but their playoff chances are like the exact same because of Alabama losing and Clemson losing. I mean, Tennessee is actually sitting in an ideal situation. You get into that LSU win has aged incredibly well. You got the LSU and the Bama wins. They got Missouri at home. They got at South Carolina and at Vandy. They go 3-0 in those games. They get to 11-1. They're in that playoff, period.
Yeah.
They're going to have the strongest one-loss resume. Missouri has, fought teams hard. They have a good D-line. But, man, that quarter, just when you play Tennessee, I mean, it's kind of similar. You saw what happened with Kentucky. I mean, you got to score some points to keep up. And, man, our quarterback Cook is one of the worst in the country. So, Tennessee's in a bounce-back spot. It is an early game. But I just don't think Missouri can keep up for 4 quarters because I just don't think they can score enough.
So you like Tennessee laying the points?
20.5 is a ton. I mean, yeah, I think I don't know. I just hate laying that many points. I'm probably staying away, but I don't trust Missouri.
LSU at Arkansas. LSU very much in the picture as well. They're going to get a shot if they can win out. They'll get a shot at Georgia presumably, and hey, crazier things I guess, but LSU only a 3.5 point favorite at Arkansas. The Razorbacks lose to Liberty last week. I've had people try to talk me into this. They have failed miserably. I am taking LSU and laying 3.5 points. Maybe you can do it because I trust your opinion a lot, but you're going to have to. This is
actually the one that's the most fascinating to me because all the sharp syndicate stuff I follow is on Arkansas huge here. And you look at, well, I think it's all situational. LSU coming off, one of their biggest wins in school history Saturday night. It's an 11 a.m. game. It's going to be in the 40s, which was good, for Arkansas. Obviously, Ole Miss fans cheering very hard for Arkansas in this game to have a shot to get back in the West because that result was just brutal for that last weekend. But I think it's a situation where, I mean, how in God's name, like LSU, how could you not take them? Arkansas losing to Liberty. I don't know what's going on with KJ Jefferson yet because we're taking this 3 days out, and I know he's really banged up. I don't know. Is Jaden Daniels, he's Arizona State guy. Has he ever played a game in cold weather? I mean, I guess I wish this thing was at night for Arkansas, but I mean, I think it's Arkansas or pass. It's just a weird one. The only problem with LSU, though, I know it. Everyone knows how much of a trap this is. But they got a great coaching staff with Brian Kelly. You got a senior quarterback in Daniels, and they're playing to get to Atlanta, the SEC championship game. So
yeah, I just don't buy it.
There's no lack of motivation, and I think people are acting like that is a thing. So
if you had told me that LSU lost in overtime last week, I might be all over Arkansas here. But LSU knows what's at stake. I just don't buy it. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm probably staying. I'm leaning towards staying away. Y'all also know my style. I come on here every week, and I don't bet road favorites in spots like this. It's like literally one of my gambling rules. I'm just not a road favorite guy. And so, off that Bama win and everything in the emotion, and obviously everybody saw the scene down there, I'll probably stay away. Despite what everybody, this Barstool, I just get so much crap because I'm from Louisiana. Despite what everybody at Barstool says, I'll be cheering for Arkansas for Ole Miss's West chances, despite the amount of grief I catch on a day-to-day basis up here. People,
Kentucky's laying 18 against Vanderbilt. I don't care anymore. I'm done with Vandy. I've tried. I've tried so hard to get them a win. I really have. I feel like I've been let down. I did everything I could. They're
just bad on. Usually think they're just bad on defense.
Yeah, they suck. I'm done. I give up. I
got nothing here. I'm staying away.
I tell you one that I like. You probably haven't given much thought to it, but you're a Louisiana guy. I really like Georgia State -14 against ULM. I kind of think
I could see that. ULM's been playing, so they had a win last week. They've been playing really high-scoring games this year. So I kind of thought if the weather was good, I was looking at over 59 in that, but ULM's been one of those teams. They've been really good at it. They've been fighting people at home, but they still struggle on the road, and that's kind of where they're at under Bowden. So I see what you're saying there.
Alabama and Ole Miss. Alabama an 11.5 point favorite in Oxford, 2:30 CBS. I mean, been talking about this game. It's lost a little of the national juice because of the SEC stuff, but it hasn't lost any of the juice here. This place is going to be a zoo this weekend, and it feels like a spot where I think Ole Miss has a chance if everything kind of breaks right.
I feel good about it. I don't want to I'm not. It's funny seeing the Lane stuff, just praising Saban as the horse on Twitter all week. Like last year, I was messing around with a countdown to the game. None of that this year. But there's a lot of stuff to get into in this game. First of all, this current era of football we live in, this is the first game in the entire playoff era, which started in 2014, that Alabama's playing that doesn't affect the playoffs. How are they going to react to that? And Nick Saban could be the greatest coach of all time, but those 18 to 22-year-olds come to Alabama to win championships. They got their hearts ripped out of their chests last Saturday night. And look, what are they playing for now? To get to a BCS bowl? That don't mean anything. That means nothing to them. And so all the people thinking Bama are going to just bounce back this week, I don't know. I think this game means so much more to the Ole Miss side. And Lane off a bye is going to have all kinds of stuff up his sleeve. Alabama doesn't have the explosive playmakers we're used to. I think that's the obvious thing. We look at that receiving core. Look, I like Ole Miss at the point. I think we got a good shot to win this thing. I really think this sets up good. I think it could get pretty wild, but if Jackson Dart takes care of the football, I think it's very possible.
I do too. I do. Maryland's at Penn State, Maryland +10. Louisville, I love this game, actually. Clemson they let it all get away last week, and they looked like crap doing it. They got a quarterback issue. Louisville's a pretty good team.
Louisville's got an underrated defense. You think about Malik Cunningham with the mobile quarterback, but Louisville's defense is like top 10 or 12 in the country. I
love
think
this game. Louisville
seven. And then also, there's the thing. Bama's dealing with this too. Clemson is too. It's like when the dam breaks a little bit, it can get bad. And like now Clemson's probably not playing for the playoff. I don't think they can make it one loss.
They're not. They're not getting there. They know
seven's a big number here. I'm looking at the under 52's high. I think this game's going to be a grind. So yeah, I like the Louisville in the 7. I get what you're saying here.
Hey, a really fun game in New Orleans. UCF and Tulane, both nationally ranked. Tulane's got a chance to get to the Cotton Bowl. Tulane laying 1.5 against Gus Malzahn and the boys. What do you think?
I like Tulane a good bit in this game because they got a great front 7 on defense. They got 2 stud linebackers, and I think they'll have a game plan for John Rice. Because I look, and I obviously love Plumlee. Obviously great Ole Miss guy. Still, you got to make him throw to beat you. It's pretty obvious, and I think Tulane can do that.
Here's one that I like. Tell me if you're agreeing. It's a Pac-12 game. I like Washington State -8 against.
They should crush her. Yeah, I think Washington State's pretty good. They're actually better on D than you think. Cam Ward's pretty good. I like them too at home against Arizona State. And I like the Oregon State to crush Cal even at 14. That's another one. So,
I do too. I like that one too. I might go heavy Pac-12 this week. This Wisconsin-Iowa game, I know nobody's talking about it, but Iowa feels like it's righted the ship a little bit, yet Wisconsin's favored in Iowa City. What do you think about it?
I always like Iowa when they're home underdog. Just through the years, they're feisty in the spot. I don't trust Wisconsin as far as you can throw them. So I'm leaning Iowa +1 here. Iowa scored a few more points the last couple of weeks, and everybody knows how bad their offense has been, but I think they can win this game.
They ran a play action pass last week. It was unbelievable. It was like
throw it in the flat or actually threw it down the field?
No, he threw it down the field. It was unbelievable. It was called I think they call it a forward pass.
Wow.
Yeah.
I figured you were going to say, yeah, they did, but then they threw it to the fullback in the flat. So
no, it was unbelievable. South Carolina heads to Gainesville. Florida looked pretty good against depleted, terrible Texas A&M team. South Carolina got a win at Vanderbilt. South Carolina gets 8 in Gainesville.
God, man, I've been back and forth on this one all week. I just can't. It's like a spot where you think South Carolina will fight them, but I just can't trust Spencer Rattler, who I never liked and couldn't believe so many people thought were going to be good this year. South Carolina, look back on their team this year. Everybody thought they were like ranked because they beat A&M at home. I mean, they lost at home to Missouri. They're not good. They're not. And I know Florida doesn't have a good defense this year. Florida really doesn't. I mean, they got a good running game, and that's what they got. And Richardson's mobile. But yeah, I just can't trust South Carolina right now. So I'm leaning to staying away though, because Florida's weird too. I do think Napier is a good coach though.
He is. He's a good coach. Georgia's at Mississippi State. This line keeps dropping, Ben. It's down to 16. Why?
I have this is a Mike Leach special spot to fight. You remember 2 years ago, they were plus 31 at Athens and they almost beat them. They lost 31-24. Georgia coming off, they beat the crap out of Tennessee. I mean, that was a dominant effort. You got to give them all the credit. That was their big game, but this would be a letdown spot off that. Look, I don't know if State can win the game, but I always say this about Leach, great underdog, bad favorite. I think this is a spot where even if State, they're not great, I think this is a spot they're going to fight. So I'll lean State in the points.
Interesting. I love Oregon minus 13.5 at home against Washington. Just love it. I think Oregon's going to smoke them in Autzen. I know you like Washington a good bit.
Well, no, so I actually agree. And I want to even going farther on that. This Bo Nix thing leaves the dumpster fire that's Auburn. He's 12-1 to win the Heisman Trophy now. What a story that is. And I'll even go farther. Kenny Dillingham, the Oregon offensive coordinator, is the next great young offensive mind in college football. He's one of one. He was at Memphis under Norvell, and they had those good offenses. What he's doing with Bo Nix, I'm telling you, if I was a G5 school or like a lower-end Power 5 school, he's who I'm hiring as a head coach out of every option in the entire country. That's how highly I think of him. What he's done with Bo Nix this year, and I thought he was great at Memphis when he was the OC back then too. I think he's the guy, and like I said, I just think extremely highly of him. I know 13.5 is a lot of points, but it's not a lot of points in the over-unders in the 70s. Oregon's going to score a ton. Washington's defense is falling all. They've had great defenses through the years under Chris Peterson Lake, but they're not like that this year. They're kind of playing more shootouts and Penix. I think Oregon, Oregon and Eugene, they're going to roll.
Kind of TCU, Texas, TCU in the playoff hunt. They're getting 7 points in Austin. Boy, it feels like a spot where TCU, the bubble pops. But
I think the bubble ends. I think Vegas is telling you that line. And I'll tell you what else about TCU. And don't get me wrong, I think they're a great story. There are a few things. Gary Patterson being on at Texas probably knows a thing or two about them. That's a little bit of that's interesting to me. But the big thing, TCU, I think it's like 5 games in a row they've played where they've either knocked out the other team's quarterback. I mean, it's like some kind of crazy. They've had a lot of breaks go their way.
Yeah.
And I like their story. And I think Sonny Dykes is an awesome offensive coach. But I mean, I just feel like this looks TCU plus 7. The line coming out at 7 instead of 4 here tells me a lot. And I kind of think Texas, that was a good effort last week in Kansas State. I think they may be righting the ship. So the only thing about this, though, is TCU always beats Texas. But
yeah.
They always fight them in this series. So it's like one of those things where you say all this and if you take Texas minus 7 and TCU wins, you're just like, what was I doing? But I still think Texas is the right side here.
North Carolina, a road dog at Wake Forest. Wake got a win. Wake lost last week. North Carolina
pulled it out of Virginia. Pretty ugly, but it was a win.
Pretty ugly, but am I crazy to kind of like the Tar Heels here?
And I don't know what to think. The last 2 years, these two teams have played. I mean, these games have gotten in the hundreds. I mean, these games get so out of control.
Over under 77.5.
Yeah, I mean, it should be. I remember last year, I think it was in the 80s, and it was in the over hit in the third quarter when it was in the 80s last year. This is just a weird line because Wake's an unranked favorite over a ranked team. I don't know what, and then also, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to think of this one, to be honest. If the weather is good, though, even with the total being this hot, I think it's going to go over, which is crazy.
Texas A&M and Auburn. Boy, before the season, you would have thought this has a chance to be a really sexy game. It's not. The storyline's Carnell Williams and Texas A&M trying to remain bowl eligible or get bowl eligible. To do it, they've got to win out. They're 3-6. They get 1.5 on the Plains against an Auburn team that probably is going to be really motivated to play for Carnell Williams at home.
That's my thing, man. It comes down to when things are going bad like this, you take the team that cares. And Auburn, that was even though they're not good, they fought so hard last week to come back in OT. They're playing hard for Cadillac. All those 5-star recruits that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars at A&M don't give a crap about this. Whenever it goes bad, it's not like these people are at A&M because they love the school. When it starts going bad, they're all thinking about the transfer portal. There's probably going to be a mass exodus out of there. And I just feel like the culture in one locker room's got to be a lot better than the other. So, I mean, I lean to Auburn here.
I kind of like Florida State at Syracuse. I know I'm laying 7 points, and you don't like.
No, I don't know. Florida State's pretty dang good, man. I mean, they killed Miami. I'll tell you, that was the one I thought Miami would fight because it was a rivalry game. And
no, they did not fight.
Hey, while we're at it on an Ole Miss podcast, let's all thank Miami for taking Mario Cristobal last year. Because I'm pretty sure Lane Kiffin would have scored a lot more points than they've scored in the last few weeks.
Don't you?
If they'd have gone, and who knows what would have happened there. But I was definitely worried about it. Man, Florida State's playing. They're pretty good. Jordan Travis is good. So that game's on a fast track too. Florida State off a rivalry wins the only thing, and Syracuse kind of fights people at home. So, I'm probably staying away, but Florida State, they're at a point where I'd say they're a pretty good football team.
Any other ones stick out? I didn't touch them all. There's a lot of other games like Southern Miss is at Coastal Carolina. Southern Miss getting 5 against a Coastal team that just got a big win. Jamie Chadwell on the radar with some people.
I wouldn't trust. I just don't think Southern's got enough offense on the road. I know they got a pretty good defense, but I just can't. They struggle to score points. So
my guys at South Alabama laying 16.5 against Texas State in Mobile.
Yeah, Texas State just lost at ULM last week.
Yeah.
It's just 16.5 is so much.
I
think South Alabama will win. I got burned on. I think I took South Alabama against ULM, and they won and didn't cover a couple weeks ago.
They got backdoored.
Yeah, I remember I lost that game. I'm trying to think, but that was most of them. I mean, I think the big thing here is I really think I don't want to I'm not chirping on Twitter. I'm trying to keep it low key, but I mean, I really think Ole Miss could win this game.
Yeah, I do too.
I do too. This sets up right. Bama's defense isn't, you got to blocking Will Anderson, I think, is obviously the paramount issue. But I think Ole Miss's running game is good enough to run the ball on them. And I just think I think they're going to be ready. I really do. And I know it's a huge weekend in Oxford, baseball team getting their rings. I mean, the atmosphere is going to be special. And I feel like it could happen here. I think Ole Miss, I definitely like Ole Miss in the points. I feel like they're either going to win or lose close. I don't think they're going to get blown out here. And I like how Lane's approached it. Last year he had the popcorn comment. This year it's just like nothing but praising the great Saban the horse. He learned his lesson, and he's kind of making fun of himself by doing everything. And so I respect it. And look, it's kind of a home underdog week. Oh, one other one I mentioned. I think Liberty's going to have a big letdown at UConn after the Arkansas win. Liberty's a 14.5-point favorite. UConn's playing real hard under Mora. I actually think UConn, I don't know if they can win, but I definitely like them in the points. That was one I want to make sure I mentioned. And I think Hugh Freeze, everybody's talking about Lane to Auburn. I think Hugh Freeze is getting the Auburn job. I'm hearing a lot of the smoke from behind the scenes on that. I'm hearing some stuff about it.
Yeah. I'm not ready to completely agree with you, but boy, I sure wouldn't disagree.
I don't know what's going to happen, but boy, I think that was a good audition last week, winning in Fayetteville after Arkansas just smoked Auburn the week before. Can you imagine an SEC with adding all the characters we have already and just toss Freeze in at Auburn? He'll fit right in though,
Yeah. All right, let's get into the NFL slate. The Sunday morning game over in Berlin, I think it's the Seahawks +3 against Tampa.
This line is just so ratty. I just don't, it's like one of those things where if you've been watching football this year, how could you not like Seattle with how Tampa's look? But that's always the thing that I'm always have my guard up for those kind of spots. So I'm probably just going to, and also it's hard to ever know what happens when you go to Europe. I feel like that makes it even harder to handicap. So I believe I'm going to be sitting on the sidelines for this game. I hate that Tampa won last week though, man.
Yeah. They did, but they didn't play well. They didn't.
No, they stayed there. They're not good, but neither is anybody else in that division.
Houston is at the Giants, another kind of ratty line. The Giants are only a 4.5-point favorite. Feels like they're begging you to take the Giants and lay the 4.5, and I'm real tempted to do it.
I'm thinking about it too because I'm wondering how Houston can score, but the Giants have been the underdog thing has been so much of their role all year. And what's weird is you see that story with their McKinney, the Bama safety, who's one of their captains, getting in that ATV accident in Mexico on the week off in Cabo. And that's not a very good look for a captain, to say the least. I don't know if I trust the Giants late. They play so many close games that I think I'm going to just sit back and watch this because I feel like it's in their DNA to play close.
Jacksonville gets 9.5 at Kansas City. The Chiefs were fortunate, frankly, to beat the Titans. They screwed around with it. They get a Jacksonville team that's just not any good.
No.
It's a big number, but it's not as big. It's not double digits, and so it's kind of in that middle area. What do you think?
KC had this stretch last year, late in the year, where they won like 7 or maybe, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, but there was a stretch where they like won all these games and didn't cover any of them. And I kind of feel like my guard's up for that right here. And Doug Peterson and Andy Reid, definitely close, former OC. I don't know what, who knows how that affects this game, but like, I feel like KC's going to win, but I'm not so sure they're going to cover. And so I think I'm going to sit this one out.
Cleveland at Miami. Miami typically pretty good at home, laying 3.5 against a Cleveland team that I can't figure out. I give up.
How this is the other rat line of the week. How is this not 7?
I know.
I saw this thing come out at 4, and I was what?
Well, I mean, a part of me wonders if it's as simple as this, Ben. If it's the NFL has so much parity this year, and the games are so close, and so many games decided within one that if you put a line at 6 or 7, people might beat you just by saying, "Oh, all right, you're gonna give me 7 points, I'll take them."
Yes, man. Miami's been good when Tua's played, though. They score a ton of points. I know that they allowed a lot the last 2 weeks on the road in Detroit and Chicago, but man, I feel like if Miami come out as a 6-point favorite, I'd be on them in this game, but I just cannot believe it's only 3.5 for what I've seen out of Cleveland this year. And I feel like they're just like begging us all to take Miami here by the way the line is, but I know I can't take Cleveland. Like there's just no way. I just can't do it.
Minnesota goes to Buffalo. The Bills got an issue at quarterback all of a sudden. The Vikings, they just win. They get 3.5 in Buffalo against a Bills team that, I guess Allen plays, but you wonder.
I think Allen's out. That's why the line went from 6.5 to 3.5. I think he's going to be out the next week or two. And that means we get the Case Keenum against the Vikings after he got him to the NFC Championship a few years ago. And I'm going to say it. This is a bold one. I love Buffalo in this game. I believe in Keenum. I think he's one of the best backups in the league. Stephon Diggs against this old team. If you're inclined to ever do those parlay plus same game parlays thing, Keenum, Diggs going off against this old team. Buffalo, big win. I think Buffalo. I don't trust Minnesota on the road either. Buffalo's got a good D, but everybody's overreacting to that bad loss against the Jets and the Allen thing. But I'm telling you, if you could find 2 or 3 backups better, you'd rather have in there than Keenum. You've done more than me. I think Keenum's good. So I think Buffalo rolls, to be honest.
Another noon game, kind of a dog, really. It'll be on the TVs here unless you have the package. This is why you should have the package if you live down here. It's the Titans at home against Denver. Tennessee laying 2. On one hand, you go lay them, and on the other hand, you're like, yeah, but if Malik Willis is the quarterback, 2 points is a bunch. If I felt like his name's escaping me right now.
Tannehill.
Thank you. If I felt like Tannehill was going to play, I'd lay these 2 points and just go ahead and spend the money. But I don't know what to do here.
Man, I just think it comes down to a very simple thing. Mike Vrabel's on one sideline and Nathaniel Hackett's on the other. Give me Tennessee, just period off the coach. I just think you've got, you literally have just the coaching difference here is just, it's too much. I think Tannehill should go. I think they're being careful not playing him last week because that division's so bad that they don't even need to risk him because the Colts, we hadn't even gotten into that. We'll get in that in a second.
I know.
Like that with Colts, Texans, and Jags, Tennessee's in the driver's seat. So, why would you risk it, So, I lean Tennessee there.
Detroit, they head to Chicago. The Bears, they're not winning because their defense suddenly is depleted. But offensively, I think they're starting to feel like they found something. Justin Fields gets NFC Offensive Player of the Week. They added a Claypool at receiver. They're a little more dynamic right now. Fields looks a little more comfortable. They're getting the tight end, the kid from Notre Dame, involved a lot more.
Oh, yeah, Claypool, yeah. For sure.
It's looking and feeling a little different all of a sudden in Chi-Town, and Detroit's coming in off a win against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. But this feels like maybe a moment where the Bears have something to build on.
I like the Bears a good bit. Detroit's terrible on the road. They're horrible on the road. I think Fields has got some momentum. I like Chicago a pretty good bit in this game. I also think Detroit, this is a great week to get the bet against them off their Green Bay win. They got their win, and I know that's no matter how bad Green Bay is, that's emotional, and because everything that's happened in that series. So I'm on Chicago with you.
One last noon game. It's the Saints coming off of whatever you want to call that on Monday night. Whatever. Pick your.
I was doing videos during the game, just trying to be funny with it. Like at halftime, my buddy I was sitting with went on a mission as a prank to find an Andy Dalton jersey to buy to give me to wear the next day. And he went through the entire Superdome and couldn't find one. And he came back and he goes, man, I guess they're just all sold out of Dalton jerseys. They must be sold out. You can't find them. They're running off the shelves.
So they go to Pittsburgh to play a Steelers team that is actually, as bad as they are, the Steelers favored. I'm sorry, Steelers getting 1.5 against the Saints.
Something about this game is so where the heck's my hang on a second. Something came up my computer where I can't see right now. Can you see me?
Yeah, I see you. Yep.
Okay, well I'll just keep going. So something's up with this game where I always say this. It's one of my cardinal gambling preachings. Whenever you look horrible on Sunday night or Monday night, just take them the next week. And we saw Cincinnati. Remember how we talked about the Bengals last week and how bad they looked on Monday night, came out and killed Carolina. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think the Saints are going to somehow win this game. I like the under 40 a lot, though. I think this is an over-under that could be 35 even. I mean, this thing's going to be ugly. So I lean under more than the Saints, but I kind of think the Saints are going to win here, even as crazy as bad as they look Monday. I really do.
I never would have thought that I would be eagerly anticipating this game, but I am. It's the Indianapolis Colts +6 in Las Vegas against the Raiders. Boy, the Colts. Jeff Saturday's going to coach. A 30-year-old dude's going to call the plays. What a mess. And then the Raiders at home laying 6. Crazy.
I'm taking the Raiders. I can tell you that. I mean, we're talking about a Colts team. Jeff Saturday was an ESPN analyst last week. He's coaching. They don't have one coach on their staff that's called an offensive play above the high school level. This is pro football.
Yeah.
And then also the way this thing's handled, they're going at Sam Ehlinger. The Raiders are obviously bad. There's no denying it. They just lost to the Saints in Jacksonville. But, I mean, there's just no way. I like the Raiders a decent bit here. I think this Colts thing is like a historic situation, and there's just no way I can take them.
I'm with you. A game I really like, Dallas -5 at Lambeau against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. I know there's this tendency to go, they're going to bounce back. They're going to bounce back. They're going to bounce back. Are they? Against a really good defense? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I don't know about them scoring, but Green Bay lost as a road favorite Detroit, and they're home underdog this week. And, that's that one that that's that trend I always follow. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit submit on Green Bay, but I'm Green Bay or nothing on this one. I mean, I think if you do like Green Bay, though, you got to bet that you can't imagine it's a shootout. You got to look at if you think Green Bay is going to find a way, you got to think it's probably because it's lower scoring. But
agreed.
I think I'm on Green Bay +5 as much as it pains me.
The over-under on that 43, in case anybody's wondering. Arizona heads to Los Angeles. The Cardinals, terrible at home, pretty good on the road. The Rams, it's just not a good team right now. As the defending Super Bowl champs, Cardinals getting 1.5 in Los Angeles.
Well, so I like the Rams until I heard Stafford's out with the concussion, and now now I'm off it. Because here's the NFC West. It's a weird thing, but the Niners always beat the Rams, and the Rams always beat the Cardinals, and it's just been a thing where the Rams they won. I don't know how many they've won in a row over Arizona, but it's a whole bunch. But having said all that, if Stafford's out, I'm off them. So if they announce that Stafford's going on Sunday, I'm taking the Rams. If not, I'm not playing the game.
The other Los Angeles team, of course, on the road, they're in San Francisco to play the Niners. The Niners, a 7-point favorite over Justin Herbert and the Chargers.
I know the Chargers got a ton of injuries, but man, 7's a lot. They play close games against everybody. I feel like 7's a lot here. So I think I'm leaning the +7. I know the Chargers have a lot of people banged up, but 7's a lot. Touchdown's a lot in pro football. I know the Niners. I do think the Niners are going to emerge over the second half, but they're not like a team you like laying a ton of points with generally. So as of now, I'm leaning the Chargers in 7.
In the Monday night game, we're going to test a trend here. NFL double-digit favorites are like 3-13 so far this season. The Eagles a 10.5-point favorite over the Washington Commanders.
I like the Commanders. They've been playing close. Even when they're playing bad, they're playing close games. So I'm leaning, I'm leaning the 11 here, and I'm leaning the Commanders. I'm not saying that they're great or anything, but you just said it. The double-digit favorite. That's a lot of points in pro football, and it seems like they play hard for Heineke. So I think they could fight. I don't think they'll win the game, but I'm not laying 11.
Ben, how can people keep up with you this weekend? How can they follow you?
So this is a bummer, but I'll just say it on here. So Barstool, we got the Barstool Invitational Friday night in Philly. It's the first college basketball thing we've ever done. Dave and Big Cat and Jake Marsh are calling it. Mississippi State's actually a part of it. They're playing Akron, and Andy Kennedy, our old friend in UAB, are playing Toledo. But they're making a huge, huge deal about it up here. And so I'm going to go to that and just do the stream and watch Bama Ole Miss. I'm sick to my stomach. I'm missing Oxford, but this is a huge, it's one of those things where, Neil, you know the drill is, being in media and company stuff. I'm not saying I'd get in trouble if I didn't go to this, but it's being strongly encouraged that everybody support this because
you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I hate, I'm sick to miss Oxford this week.
Hey, you get to watch Jelly Walker play. He's terrific. He's fun to watch.
He is, but it's one of those things where you reading the room. I don't think I'd get in too much trouble if I wasn't there, but they're very strongly encouraging everybody to go and support it. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to watch the stream, do it big. I'm sick. I'm not going to be in Oxford. I made LSU game. I made Kentucky, and I'm planning on making the bowl game. I mean, it definitely hurts me. I'm friends with so many guys on the baseball team. I'm sick to miss them getting their rings. I also do want to mention I got to do something. I'm not going to say the video isn't out yet, but I got to invite a couple Ole Miss players to the Senior Bowl. Jim Nagy out of Mobile hit me up and asked me to do the invitation to the team and the players. I don't want to mention who it's for yet, but I thought that was just, you never it's just funny. This job is so crazy. The stuff you get to do, you never imagined possible, but I thought that was really fun.
That's really cool, man. I'm super happy for you, and you got a lot going on for yourself, and that's awesome. Enjoy Philly as much as Philly can be enjoyed, and we'll talk to you next week. We'll see what happens in this Ole Miss Alabama game. Who knows what next week's about when Ole Miss heads to Fayetteville? It could be a massive game. It could be a nothing game. I just don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, no, we'll know. Like I said, the Arkansas LSU thing, look, Arkansas's got a shot. I mean, it's just if Arkansas beats LSU in that early game, everything changes. So, certainly hope I hope they do. And hopefully Ole Miss Bama's big, and hope everybody enjoys Oxford this week. I'm literally I'm just nauseous saying I'm not there. I hate I'm missing it. But everybody have fun. Hi, Toddy. Look forward to hopefully beating Bama.
Benjamin, talk to you next week, my friend.
Thanks, Neil.
Again, our thanks to all of our guests today who joined on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. Mike Griffith of the AJC, Ryan Brown of The Next Round, Parker Fleming of the Purple Theory podcast, and, of course, Ben Mintz. Just then with Barstool Sports. This will be the Friday Oxford Exxon podcast. We will be back with you on Saturday evening. You got Alabama and Ole Miss kicking off at 2:30. It's probably a post-game show starting a little after 6 o'clock. Chase Parham will be with you for that. That's brought to you by Dead Soxy. Don't forget promo code Rebel Grove at checkout. 25% off the best socks you'll ever put on your feet. And then we'll be back with you on Monday for another edition of the Oxford Exxon podcast. We'll recap Alabama and Ole Miss. Look ahead to Ole Miss's regular season road finale at Arkansas, the Rebels and the Razorbacks next Saturday, either at 6 or 6:30 from Reynolds Razorback Stadium. So we'll talk about that throughout the week. Don't forget Ole Miss basketball on Friday night, 6 o'clock, FAU at Ole Miss. I'll have coverage of that at rebelgrove.com on Friday night as well. We'll have full coverage on Saturday from the game, my 10 weekend thoughts, recruiting roundup, all that stuff coming to you on Sunday as well. So stick with us over the weekend. Enjoy the post-game show. Thanks for being with us this week. Thanks for making MPW Digital a part of all that you do. We certainly appreciate all of the numbers that we get. It's because of you guys. We thank you very much for it. We'll talk to you again later this weekend. Have a great weekend. If you're driving, be careful. Take care.